Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of Post-Burnout.com interviews, we talk with the Mayo-based multidisciplinary artist and musician Ryan Ennis of Two for Joy. Ryan discusses releasing a new album each month for the year 2024. In particular, he discusses his albums Rain and Solas Fair, which were released as part of his home recording series. His move from Dublin to Mayo and how the two counties differ. What inspires him as an artist and a writer. The importance of independence in creating art. Writing reflective art without being marred by nostalgia. The power of nighttime as a child and how this influences his work, creating work during the lockdowns, his plans for a future fantasy-related album, and much more.
Hello, can you hear
Hey,
me?
how's it going? I can hear you fine. How's it going?
How's things anyway?
Grand man. I guess I'll start off this interview by asking, as we're recording this, it's November 5th at 12 p.m.
Yeah,
Um, Tonight
got
there will be
told
a
by the
certain
little robot lady there. She's like, "You are recording."
tonight there will be a certain election. Who do you think is
Oh,
going to get in? Not who do you
oh,
want, who do you think
who do
will
I?
actually get in? Yeah.
Oh my God! I think
So when people listen back to this, they can have a document of this
I thought,
time. I
yeah,
guess this
and it'd
very
be our faces
important
as well. Like,
this very important
but
election
it's.
in
I
American
think
history.
I don't think they'd want to make another Black Mirror
Yeah.
season of an. You know, I think Kamala would be a breath of fresh air.
I think Joe is going to seal at the last minute.
Yeah, the last
That's
minute,
my
yeah.
prediction. He's going to come back. He's like, I'm back. He's like with like
Just kind of
sunglasses and
like
shit. It's just like an
Mr.
ice cream.
Magoo way in the presidency.
I mean, I think that's my prediction. It's like the last minute thing. It's like nothing we've ever seen. Well, I
Something
mean,
has never been talked about.
a lot has changed since January when we last spoke. I mean, on top of like world politics, obviously, I mean, you've like basically created another discography in that time,
Yeah,
just relentless,
it's
and I mean this in a good way, relentless, releasing.
yeah, that's right, the same word. I had
Do you sleep? That's my main question.
um
You have a lot of books behind you. Do you read all them in like
I,
2 hours?
I actually I do love a bit of Stephen King. Yeah,
Yeah.
do love it. And
Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if you've
Oh
read
yeah.
any of his.
No, I know his name, but I've never actually checked out his stuff.
If you
I don't
like
get
any
to read as
fantasy,
much as I'd like to. Yeah, I
if
don't
you
get
like
to
any
read as much as I'd
fantasy,
like
the
to because I'm just
Stormlight
like,
Archive is amazing. One of
I'll
my
check it out.
favorite fantasies.
Recommendations. No,
Or
actually, I remember. The funny thing is, the only Stephen King I've read is his book on writing, and I remember just getting like good tips from it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So
That's
actually, this is a weird thing. If you ever go to my website and read the articles, I tend to just go he says or she says a lot, like rather than it's like I read other authors or other like writers, and they kind of go like they're trying to imply their intent. So they'd be like, if you read like another artist, like sorry, another interviewer, like talking with an artist, it'd be like he says slyly, or they kind of put these terms in it. But I remember reading Stephen King, and he was like, sometimes it's best just to say he says or she says. You don't have to get fancy about that
yeah,
description.
yeah.
And I
It's
think I
it.
just take it at the heart, where I'm just kind of like he says, she said, and I don't know if it's boring prose, but I don't know. I think it's efficient.
Well, it's like, if more genuine. When
Yeah,
you start throwing all these words in it that you've never even used in your life, and then
yeah,
you all of a sudden you're using it in your book, people will feel the
yeah.
pretentiousness kind of coming through, you know.
But that was
But
such a
that's
great
actually
book
funny
about the
you're talking about
craft.
on writing because that was like one of the first Stephen King books I read, and it was
Yeah.
the reason it was a friend of mine from school. I like was interested in writing books and stuff like that, and obviously very badly.
Yeah.
Uh, so I
Well,
was
we all
like,
have to.
"Hey, mate,
It's good to be
read this
bad
for
when
me."
you're away from the crowd. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and he's like, "Man, this is a terribly written book. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, have you heard about prose? He's like,
Oh,
read this. And I was like, I'm not offended or anything like that, but I was like,
mhm,
really thankful, really grateful. I was like, thanks
yeah,
for that. Yeah. Because it helped, get me into more Stephen King.
yeah. No, I want to read this stuff too, but it's just kind of like again, just like getting time in the day to read. I need to part time. I need to
Oh
because like
yeah.
especially with doing this like site and stuff, I'm just like constantly and then like with your work and all, and just kind of like people like I'm getting stuff done, and then it's just like someone else is coming to me, hey, can you do an interview? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
so I'm just trying, and it's like I'm just a one man army. I need to assemble a little crew of writers, but I need to have the moolah that
Oh yeah,
that's the
yeah,
sad thing about
exactly.
like writing online is that there's just no expectation of payment, and I wouldn't want to solicit writers unless I could afford to pay them.
Exactly. Yeah,
If
yeah.
someone wants to volunteer, that's their own prerogative. But I'm kind of like, if
Mm.
I'm asking somebody, I don't want to be like, can you do it for free, for
Yeah.
exposure, for portfolio?
Yeah. Oh, it is hard for any kind of creative people like and it's funny because when it's like yourself working with creative people who also don't have money.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're
Dude, it's insane. Like, and I think actually one thing I've become more sympathetic to from doing this website is like clickbaity websites, which I won't name, but clickbait
yeah.
websites who kind of try and drive traffic to their website because I'm thinking if you have like the amount of clicks you have to get on a single ad to get any kind of payment, not even just like not riches, but just like even just a euro or two is like
Yeah.
insane because like I think each view on an ad, I think I could be making this up, but like with Google Ads, which I run the site, it's like a cent. Uh, like a view is 1 cent. So if you have like a full crew of people, like a lot of these websites do, you need like millions of views
Yeah.
like per article to get any kind of move. And that's if like people aren't using ad blocker and shit. So like even that I'm sympathetic to now. When you go to websites like, could you please turn off ad blocker? I'm like, I understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate paywalls. So paywalls are like
Oh my
the
God, yeah.
worst.
Usually,
And
if like a paywall is kind of like a death sentence to your website, though,
kind of,
because
yeah,
especially a lot of the younger generation, they hate ads or anything like that on
yes,
pay, so it's like kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna X out of it and find
yes.
it somewhere else.
Dude, I don't mind ads, but like I've been on
Mm,
some websites where you're like reading an article and like like videos play, autoplay and shit, and you're like, but it's for other articles, so they're trying to get people to read the other shit, and I get it, but it's like it's distracting from what I'm actually reading, where it's like I'm trying to see what this article's about, and I'm getting distracted by something that's completely unrelated. I'm like, what are you doing here? Like this is just
yeah,
bad, yeah, UI, you know?
yeah. One of my favorite kind of like sites write-ups to find are recipes.
Oh
They
yeah.
love to write, don't they? Here's my
Yeah,
life
that's the thing.
story before the
If you
recipe.
want good pros, look at it. Yeah, look at a chef.
Yeah.
I'm actually subscribed to what do you call it, like a mailing list for recipes and stuff. And yeah, you get like, here's what I'm doing. Like, here's me in Tuscany and stuff. I'm like, I don't care. Like, no offense. I get it, like, because that's the thing. I think also being a chef is that you can't just be like I'm a cook. It's kind of like you have to be like, I'm like this world traveler. Like everyone's doing the Anthony Bourdain thing, but it's like everyone has to be like, I'm so well educated in these like varying cultures. Like here I am in Mexico talking to people about the local cuisine, and it's not even just like Mexican food. It's like I'm in this specific region. I'm in this specific city where they're famous for this exclusive kind of cuisine. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna make it.
Well, it's kind of like people have to become so many things for their jobs now,
Yeah.
like that, and like they're also being their what would you call it, like a marketing kind of person, or you know,
Dude, that's
their
everyone I talk to now. It's like every independent artist I talk to, it's like you have to be like a social media man. I say this a
social
lot,
media.
so
Yeah, yeah.
I'm probably like repeating myself if people listen to these interviews a lot. But like I always notice that like you can't just wear the hat of being. I suppose you could if you have like a team, but like if you're an
Mm,
independent artist like yourself or like a lot of the people I'm talking to. It's kind of like you have to do PR, you have to do social media management, you have to do EPKs, you have to be able to do all these things. And I actually, and this offer is extended to you as well, of course. But I sometimes like offer my services. It's like if people want to send me an EPK, I could try and help out and like help write up and stuff to the best of my ability. Just because I read so many of them, I kind of know what are the good ones and what are the bad ones now.
Yeah,
It's just kind of exposure. It's just kind of like this is too dense. This is like it needs to be somewhat succinct. This is what my advice be, somewhat succinct. Credit your photographer if you wouldn't mind, because I hate having to like search for like the photographer, like who is this? And then sometimes you just don't get anything. Credit the photographer if you can.
yeah,
Give photos, give like a few options, because sometimes I get like an artist photo and I just have like the one image and I'm like, I'm just trying to like, go, okay, well that's it, to some degree kind of alleviating. I actually remember, do you remember that movie, The Blair Witch Project?
yeah, yeah,
I remember reading about there's a great book called Best Film Year Ever 1999. It's about all the films that came out in 1999 and kind of what the films that are being released kind of say about that year as a whole.
yeah,
Just as we're on the precipice of a new millennium, and it's really fascinating. But they talk about like when they were making the Blair Witch Project, they only gave outlets a single image to use, so everyone had to use the same image because they didn't want stuff to get revealed. So they were very selective and things like that. And
yeah.
sometimes I think about that like PR thing where it's like, are you Blair Witching me right now? That's my term for it, I guess. Like if someone just sends me a single promo image, I'm like, or like I sometimes you get like one band photo or one artist photo and like maybe the single cover, and that's like what you have to work with. You're like, okay, but then
Yeah,
like I tend to embed the song like in the articles I do on the website. So you'll see it twice then because like it's just a cover image from like DistroKid or whatever distributor they use. So it'll just be
mm.
the same image twice. So I'm
Just
like,
say- That's
I tend not to use it.
yeah, it's kind of unfortunate for the. 'Cause I can kind of understand sometimes why that can happen. If they can't find, if some people just don't have somebody to take a photo of them without them
Yeah,
making it look like a selfie.
yeah,
But
yeah. I
sometimes
kind
it's
of like
like,
that too, though. I kind of like the selfie stuff. It's kind of it's very authentic. If you're an independent artist, it works. If you're
yeah,
like
yeah,
if you're on like Universal, you shouldn't be doing that. But
yeah, unless they're going for something.
yeah, unless it's like the veneer of authenticity. And not to
Yeah,
say that like and to be clear, when I say that, I'm not saying that major label artists are inauthentic, to be clear.
yeah.
Well, necessarily.
I see that's it, and that's it. The labels are tough because it's like I think they're shooting the industry in the foot. Labels, I think a lot of people end up having to just go independent and end up having to carry all the other jobs with it,
Yeah, man.
like because
Yeah.
they don't make it easy. It's like I don't know if it was like it before, like in the 60s and stuff, but I always just I felt like older musicians were signed on to labels a lot easier back then. And because there are musicians that I would have like Dave Ellis, his name
Yeah,
is.
you mentioned him before. Yeah, yeah. I
And
think.
I probably would have done one of the other
Yeah.
interviews, and but he's not well known, like. But
Yeah.
if he was around today, he definitely wouldn't have had vinyl.
Hmm.
He wouldn't have
Yeah.
had physical copies printed because it's just not possible now for independents unless they have worked really hard and good following that they could make the money to pay for that. But like, it's quite tricky. I'd just be my dream to have like a record of
Yeah.
some albums, but they're ridiculously priced. But understandably, because I know
Yeah.
it's a lot of work that goes into it. But
Yeah.
it's just like the labels, if they actually worked on helping the artists, but what they want, labels want are the artists to have done everything already, and then they'll sign you on,
Hmm.
rather than taking them on and then working from there.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because like I've often spoken to artists who do release vinyl independently, and even if
Yeah.
you do have the moolah for every like pressing plant is just so backlogged that it's like it's so because I've spoken to certain independent artists who've kind of um like they're trying to do promo shows for and they're trying to do releases and like
Mm.
it is just a matter of it's at the dictation of whenever they're available, whenever the printing because
Yeah.
like sometimes you'll be like, oh, the album's coming out. I'm just making up the date, March 12th, right? And then it's like, yeah, it was meant to come out in March. It came out in June. It's just like that because you're just waiting on the vinyl. You're like, if you want to
Yeah.
coincide it, and some people have to kind of a very common thing I hear is like they put the physical thing say in January, and then they get the physical releases in like May or whatever, and it's just kind of like the album's been out and people have heard it, and it's just kind of it kills some momentum a little bit. I think when you have to do that, you have to if you're doing that, if you're doing vinyl or you're doing any physical release, like I'm not sure what it's like with cassette or CD. I suppose CD would be easier to kind of get yourself like because I don't know, but even then like I mean CDRs are kind of dying out too, like my computer the last two laptops I've had didn't have any kind of like
Yeah,
CD
that's the problem is this the laptops don't come with them anymore. So it's very you have to get like a extra things to
external.
make them yourself, but
Yeah,
they are a lot more affordable to get someone to make them, like CD Baby or something like that or whatever.
yeah,
Like some CD duplication, because I know there's like a difference as well. If you're making them yourself, it's more so data
yeah,
rather
yeah.
than like actually being what do they call some sort of technique when it's like glass or something like that, and it's
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about too. And
yeah,
also you can see like I remember like when I was a kid when I was still getting CDs like sometimes you buy like you get a CD from like a busker on like Grafton Street or whatever. I've done that a few times if I really like their music and
yeah,
you just see like the purple thing instead of like the proper silver and it's just like I don't know.
yeah,
It's very DIY but it's just kind of like you
mm,
kind of know this isn't a professional product in whatever sense that is. But no, I don't think that's a negative, but also it used to remind me, do you remember like years ago when you'd be on like holidays and someone would like sell you like bootleg CDs or even DVDs and they would come kind of like with like a piece of paper. It'd be like a sheet of paper and then that piece of paper would be kind of like in a plastic envelope and that was like so a lot of people like distribute their CDs like that. So it looks like a
yeah,
bootleg in a way. But I was actually talking to someone yesterday. I was talking to Evan Walsh, who used to be in the band The Stripes. He's in a new project now,
right,
Savage Arts, and it's a very interesting interview. If you're, I'm not trying to plug my other shit, but it's like it's a very interesting interview. I think if you want to talk, because he's doing things independently. 'Cause say the Stripes were signed with EMI, which is a subsidiary of Universal
right,
Music Group, and he was kind of talking about that experience and like now doing things independently and how things work. And there's a great label. He's released it with them. I'm a fan of their work because they have just such a diverse um what do you call it like roster. It called Blowtorch Records. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're out in Galway and they're
right,
doing like artists across the country, both south and in north.
mm,
And they're also doing like a couple of international acts too. So it's just like a really great label. And they do vinyl, they do things like that. And he was saying like
that's
that's kind
class.
of like, maybe people were getting in touch with. I don't know. Like I have no
Yeah,
affiliation with them, but I do kind of
yeah,
we like their stuff. Like it really feels like a proper kind of independent alternative in this country that yeah, and you listen to because the guy has a podcast. He does like written he republished one of my articles too for disclosure. That I did for the Goo, and he's like giving it he's like really giving like independent artists in this country a chance to really
yeah,
be in a proper label, and I think that works because like I speak about this a lot where it's like everything feels so atomized and everything feels so like there's no real central sense of like getting on the Late Late Show really, and everyone's gonna see that, or
mm,
Jules Holland, or any of these kind of like big shows that everyone's gonna watch and kind of hear you. So everyone's just kind of like vying for attention in a lot of ways. And I think
yeah,
like in a label like that, if you go, this is a good label, I'm gonna like follow them and check out their stuff, you can
mm,
kind of go I don't know, it kind of centralizes things a little bit, I feel.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is definitely important. It's definitely needed, and I always love hearing things like that, especially with labels when they're actually doing something to help. Because
Yeah.
even here in near Castlebar and stuff, there's the music scene is really improving over the past
Yeah, it's
few
great.
years as well. Like there's a place down on Bridge Street. as well. The Bridge of Song, it's called, and it's
Hmm.
basically this kind of open mic. It's quite hard to get into though because it's always so backed up with
Yeah, you were telling me about this last time.
I
Yeah, and I
was, yeah,
remember.
you've great memory,
Well, no,
man.
no, no. It's not. It's
I
not. It's
still
just
haven't got in.
it's not great memory. It's just more like it's like a detective film, like when you watch like a film and they pick up like a teddy bear and then they get flashbacks to like
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
child dropping it or something like that. It's
But
like that kind of
yeah.
association. I'm like, wait,
Yeah, but
yes.
I still haven't got into it.
Yeah.
This last time we were talking about it. But it's a great place to be anyway. The music is fantastic. They had what would you call it? Like an anniversary kind of event there a couple of weeks ago. And it was like, because I think they've only been going for what, about 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years since they started it. But it's
Well, one thing I think is really important about things like that is that some artists kind of get involved with things like that only to further their own career in some ways, and
yeah,
it's not intending to be actually part of any kind of scene. But and I think it's great that like even if you're not getting involved yourself in terms of getting on there, that you still stay active in that scene for, if nothing else, support, because I think that's a very important thing
I
where
think so. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Because it's
because
like, you know, at that time, one thing people may be musicians, but we're also listeners, you know?
yeah, yeah. This is vodka, by the way. So,
Oh,
yeah, I'm bearing in for these wild chats that we going now. It's just a bit warm, a bit parched. Well,
I
actually, one
just
thing
have a tissue. That's from my nose.
I also have coffee, so I'm just drinking
That's
everything.
all
I
I
have
have.
coffee and I have water and I have a pen.
A pen.
I never. Sometimes I do use this. Like it's just handy to have. I feel like I don't know. Like I always feel over prepared. Where I always have my
Well,
pen and
you do
notebook
look
here.
very, very like professional there with holding the pen while discussing,
Yes, and then I
it's
have my notebook
oh, a
here. But
notebook
it's just
too.
like,
Yeah,
to be fair, I don't even have really any notes for this because I didn't. I was
yeah.
just like, I listened to the new record, which we'll get onto. But I just like I always try to take like little notes, just like when an artist that, just so I know the beats and like I hit this. But
Yeah.
one thing I want to ask actually, just because I'm interested in it, so you're writing, so like you were mentioning, doing short stories. You were mentioning even writing a book. Um, you self-published, didn't you? I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah. Did I self-published years ago, many
Yeah.
years ago.
You told me about that at the time because I remember I was ha like, to be fair, like I look back at like a lot of my old writing and I don't like it. I think it's very unfocused, not really much to say. Could like, because at the time I was only doing like two drafts at most. I was not sitting down and really picking apart my writing and kind of
Mm,
like trying to make whatever I was writing the best it could be. I was very just much like, I want to get this out and I want to move on to the next thing.
yeah.
I lacked discipline, I lacked focus, and
Mm,
so I look back a lot at that writing that I was actually submitting to get published, and it's just embarrassing in my opinion. But I remember at the time, I think I wrote like on Facebook that was like, "Oh, I got rejected, woohoo! Like I'm a proper writer now," or something like that. And
yeah.
you were like, "You should check out Amazon self-publishing and things like that." So,
Yeah.
what sort of stuff do you write in terms of like
Well,
your creative
actually,
writing?
I actually have. Wait, hold on. I have this one here. Uh, that's called
Between heaven and
Between
hell.
Heaven and Hell. That's probably like that was one I wrote many years ago. I'll see if there's a year on it. No, no year on it. But it was
That's
like it's
hard to reference in.
yeah, it's as you can see, like it's big, nice big writing in there for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
for the vision impaired
few,
like myself with my glasses. Now
yeah.
I'm short-sighted, so I could read that.
It's kind of obviously I'm not the best writer, but it was just something I had in my head, and I just wanted to get it out, and I didn't really care about whether it was written correctly or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's just a kind of story about a kid who gets into trouble a lot, but there's a lot more to that. And he lost his dad when he was very young, and there's a bit of a kind of horror streak to it where basically he has an accident and a whole load of mess happens then after the accident, and people are not acting the way they should be, and he's being treated horribly, and it could be a bit of a obvious twist where it's actually, he never
Well, don't
woke up.
spoil it. Don't spoil it. Get people intrigued enough, and then they go, "Well, I'm gonna check that out." So that's what you do. So Between
It's just
Heaven
a
and
quick
Hell by
read
Ryan
as
Ennis.
well.
How
It's a
many
quick
pages
read,
is it
and it's kind
roughly?
of like
Is
a
it like
little,
is it
uh,
a novella or a proper like
yeah, a little
fiction?
novella, really. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And then obviously during COVID, I just wrote a little, another one called Isolation, and a little bit bigger than that one, but not much. Still another novella, and it was obviously inspired by the COVID madness, and
yeah.
basically it's
I was gonna
about
say isolation during COVID, really.
yeah, yeah. And well,
Do you think
it's like a kind of future with robots and stuff, and the world falls apart, and
very
basically he's like
pressing now
the last
AI?
man and the last man alive, basically kind of thing.
Okay,
And then I just
that's
got
great.
carried away over halfway through the book, and then it just took a turn, and I just for some reason I could not control myself. So I prefer the first half of the book, really. Yeah.
That's always interesting when you kind of engage with horror or sci-fi or any kind of fantasy is that you get like a concept and then it's kind of like, well, how do I end it? And it's just like,
Yeah.
especially if it's like dystopian or if it's like, well, how do I kind of end it? And I think it's like really interesting because like sometimes it goes. I think a lot of the times like the biggest, not critiquing your writing, obviously I haven't read it, but with like a lot of things sometimes it can go very off the rails and be kind of dissatisfying once you get to
Yeah.
the end. You're like, oh no, the ending was just because sometimes like I have a tendency to kind of end things somewhat ambiguously, I don't know,
Mm.
ambiguously.
Well,
And this is
that's
why I
funny.
never made as a writer. But ambiguously, I tend to end things ambiguously, and sometimes that can be very dissatisfying. But I often think those are my like preference. I kind of think like when you leave things open ended and
Yeah.
sort of just infer things and let readers kind of make up their own mind. Readers are smart, they read books for leisure, not just
Yeah.
for college,
Yeah, that's the thing. 'Cause it's funny because I actually preferred the older one, this one,
Mm,
compared to the one I wrote in 2019 or 20. You know, funnily enough, I don't know. It just felt more of a solid story. You
yeah.
know, I think the other one was just a pastime during being locked down.
Yeah, no, totally. I think like that was COVID was a really interesting kind of creative endeavor where I forget who I was speaking to, but because I just speak to so many people with this, but like which is a nice complaint to have. But I was speaking to someone who and they were kind of like, yeah, if you weren't using that time, it's kind of just a waste that if you weren't using the time of COVID because you'll never really have an opportunity like that anymore. Knock on wood,
Yeah,
I prefer actually living rather than, because I was still in
yeah.
college. I was finishing up a college degree when COVID hit, and I'd hate it. I hate doing college remotely because I like one of the lecturers I had, Michael Murphy, who I've actually interviewed on this podcast as well. He was saying like, it's really challenging because he was very sympathetic during that time. He's like, because you go to college and you're there in the building and then you go home, you're able to decompress. Obviously, you have essays and stuff like that, but like when you're doing college at home, or it's like you don't have that kind of
Well, separation.
separation. Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
you kind of have to you kind of end up I don't know, constantly in work mode. It's just I didn't like it at all. I thought it was very unhealthy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about what it is for someone to be locked
Yeah,
in because it can be different. For me, I enjoyed it, you know,
yeah,
uh, mainly because I hated my job, like working in Walton's. Like it was not right. I liked the people I worked with,
yeah.
but it was still retail. But
Hmm.
it was during COVID as well. From being at home, that's when I decided to start my pet portrait business. So like that's this little guy here. There's Wally.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I follow your TikTok, and you know, I see like a lot of the work you're doing in terms. I don't use TikTok very frequently, so I'm only ever on there if I'm posting something. But when I'm on there, I get like a lot of your
Um,
art coming up, and you're a real Renaissance man, if you don't mind me saying. You have your finger in a lot of pies, which I really appreciate too, because like I think um. I don't know. I think it's good to have kind of like a varying outlet, and obviously there's going to be some things that you're stronger at than others. If you're a creative person, but I think it's good to kind of be constantly exploring different avenues of creativity. I've recently, I don't know why I got into like I'm not a good artist, so a lot of the stuff I'm doing is just for myself. But I got like I'm doing like little drawings and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I'm just like just doing like silly little cartoons in my own time, and it's not for any kind of like career goal. It's just more to I don't know, just to do shit, you know what I mean? I think like turning 30, for example, was kind of a big one for me where it's like
Mm.
it's kind of good just to have because like just to have some semblance of documentation for it, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's kind of been an important thing too. And now like I'm trying to get into I'm even doing like a bit of poetry as a means of exercising. And I don't know if I'll ever submit them for publication. I probably will, but it's difficult because like I just don't have the attrition for constant rejection. 'Cause that's the thing when I don't know if you've tried to get published in the traditional sense, but the standards are so high that it's like I don't know I think I'm writing pretty significant stuff in my mind, but then other people don't seem to think of it that way.
Well, from what I've read of your stuff, it's definitely well above average. And the thing is, I think most of when you think of rejections, especially when it comes to writing, it's actually not about you. And
Yeah,
that's the one thing I would probably tell you, why to just keep doing it and man, annoy them.
yeah, I know.
That's the thing, annoy them because there was somebody who said the same thing about music. And like obviously if someone's able to sing, they sing to like say four judges. Every one of those could say no to this person. And then they could sing to the next four judges and they'll all say yes.
Yeah,
So it's like it's very subjective. And when it comes to art, like you said there earlier, you said about not being good. When it comes to art, I get rid of the word good and bad because there is no such thing. There's
yeah.
only different.
Yeah, I think it's what's significant to you because like I think a lot of times you can look at like stuff that's um I don't know, probably not great shape. I love like modern art, for example, and I sometimes like there's the Modern Art Museum in Dublin that I love because it's free and you just get great stuff, and that's the one thing I really love about Ireland actually is that most of our museums and galleries are free, where it's not really the case in a lot of places. I think it's something we take for granted. Obviously, I mean they get government funding and they donations and things like that. Like I was recently at I forget the name of the gallery. It's the museum on the Lewis line. I was there recently, and it's funny. I hadn't been there since I was a kid. I actually think the last time I would have went there was when I was on a school trip with St. Kevin's, and yeah, and all those years ago. And so it's about 20 years ago. We're talking now. It would have been about 2006, so a little under 20 years ago. But I went in, man. I was in the lobby, and it's like, oh, it's all just come back to me. Like they had that little kind of glass thing where you put the money in for donations
Yeah.
and you're just seeing like all the notes they're getting and stuff like that. And I saw I saw a little kid with his parents like trying to reach in, like obviously not actually trying to steal, but just like seeing if he could. And it's like, yeah, it's bringing me back. I think like all the kids were trying that shit when I was there,
Yeah.
man. There's just a temptation there. We all turn into little rascals. You give us enough disobedience, we all turn into Lord of the Flies.
Oh man, sure. It did turn into Lord of the Flies in St. Kevin's when they'd all go swimming.
Yes, yes, yes. We're back on
You're,
Kevin's already.
yeah, yeah.
We can't do one interview for those who don't know. Kevin's was our primary school that we went to. Yeah, good times. Does it ever feel like 20 years ago to you? Because I'm thinking for a while, I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe that's 20 years ago now. Now I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah. Well, for me, it feels like a completely different life because
Yeah,
so much has changed in my life, you know, and it feels like I'm just remembering somebody else,
yeah.
when I think back to then. Because even, for me, sometimes you know, especially being probably a younger sibling in a large family, it's kind of like you're not really yourself yet.
Yeah, no,
So
totally.
I just feel like I didn't really grasp. I would think I probably would have been close to a point where when we were hanging out, where I would probably had more of an identity then, because we'd be like messing around with comics and stuff like that,
Yeah,
making
yeah.
our own kind of things. So it was like little kind of inklings of maybe bits of creativity with us, but it wasn't until I left even secondary school, man, that I didn't come out of my shell. Like,
Yeah. No, totally, and
probably,
I think that's because you when we were talking last time, you said you didn't have the best experience in secondary school, but I don't know. I think sometimes like trying like adolescence is such an interesting time because
yeah.
you're trying to develop yourself while also I think in the school setting there's a sense of conformity. But obviously you're wearing in our case with like school uniforms. I know it's not
Mhm.
like some places don't do that, but like in Ireland, the school uniform is pretty common everywhere, whether you go to public school or private school here. Everyone tends to wear school uniforms. I'm sure there are places that don't, but I always remember it's weird. You get like a weird sense of identity on like non-uniform day, and it's
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
the one time you get a sense of expression. But I was thinking back actually that time, it's kind of interesting because like I remember I, I don't know. I've always wanted to explore this as some kind of like means of creating. I just don't have the intellect to be able to do it. But what I always like about um secondary school is that you really get a sense of individuality by the jacket you wear over your school uniform, whether you're wearing, because like I remember kids and myself included, because I was a rocker so to speak, and
Yeah.
kids wearing like black hoodies, and that kind of was a symbol in of itself. And then there was kids who would wear like certain jackets, and there was a sign of affluence with certain jackets. It was like, oh, you're wearing like North Face or something like that. That's kind of an affluent thing. Or I'm trying to think. There's that new brand now, but I can't think of the name of. But they have like the Target. They have the patch there that with like the Target symbol. It's like it's a really expensive jacket and shit like that. Kids didn't have that when I was in school. Like
Oh, yeah.
but it's like I think I'm fascinated by that as a terms of like expression of individuality. You get a sense of kind of music people listen to, or who they are as a person, kind of creativity. I remember there was a kid in my school who had like a hoodie that was like designed like a dinosaur, so it looked like a dinosaur thing. So it had like the scales going down the back, and I don't know. I think like even in like, but I think conformity is sort of expected, and I think maybe this can be kind of a stickler for people like yourself who are more kind of creative inclined, where I think creativity and actual interest in certain topics, not even every topic you're learning in school, but I think it sort of gets beaten out of you a little bit, where it's like the other kids are kind of like if you're too smart or something like that, the other kids are going to give you shit for it. And it's like, it's
Yeah.
just, I'm not too smart, but interested or invested, because I was like really interested in like language and history. That was kind of what I was interested in school. And there's just this idea that if you're constantly like raising your hand or actually kind of engaging with it, that people are going to kind of notice. And it's just, it's a weird thing because you're discovering yourself, but then you're also in this like
You're kind
machine of
of,
conformity.
yeah, you're kind of being careful.
Yeah. Was that your experience? Did you find that but then again, I mean there are other kids who like totally rebel and are just like
Oh,
screw
yeah.
you. Like I really like it's funny because you get kind of like socially isolated for such a thing. I remember there were kids in that, but looking back, I'm like, God damn, they were kind of right not to conform in a way, you know?
Hmm. I think for us in our secondary school, we weren't allowed to wear jackets.
Oh
Other than
really? Oh yeah,
other
that's
than
right. You guys had this yeah, I remember because
school jacket, they were awful.
yeah, no, because I remember
We weren't actually even allowed to wear a scarf. I remember we were, you know, it actually it's funny enough because that book there, the Between Heaven and Hell, was actually inspired a lot from my secondary years
sure.
and that school. But uh, it was snowing outside, and we'd be wrapping up to put on our scarves, and the vice principal came over and he's like, "Take those scarves off."
Jesus.
Yeah,
Was he wearing one?
most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
He
No,
had a
that's
car,
mad.
you see. He had a car
Yeah.
he could drive home. We had to walk home, and it's like snowing outside. And he's like, take those scarves off. It's not
Yeah.
part of the school uniform.
Yeah, no, that's insane. Yeah, because I remember like your school, because like where I would get the bus, because there was the Beeline, which was like a private bus thing that was in our state, and your secondary school, and my secondary school, we'd get the bus at opposite sides of the road, so you could see the kids from Tala and the kids who were dreaming where I was going,
Mm.
and I forgot. Yeah, you guys did have. Actually, I remember one time it was so awkward, dude. I had a jacket that was similar to the one you guys were wearing one time, and I was wearing it. And across the road, the guy was stopping, like waiting for me, like the bus
Oh,
driver.
no way.
And I had to be like, no, no, I'm getting, I'm getting over here. You know what I mean? Because it was like, yeah, I think on it was like,
Imagine, imagine if he just, were awkward enough to actually just go over to him and just
yeah,
get,
yeah.
and you're just
No,
spending
I
this whole
wasn't.
day in the wrong school.
That would be fun. That would actually be like a fun little story. The wrong school, where it's like a kid just experiencing a different school. There's your story right there. It's a kid
Yeah,
from your school kind of going to our school and seeing kids with different jackets. Okay, I got my story now. We can
there you
we can
go.
co-write that. You know what I mean? Copyright Aaron and Ryan 2024. That's a good idea. Yeah, I think I got my story now. Just but
There you go.
we should
It's
do
got a kind
like
of comedy feel to it, I think, maybe
yeah, we
dark,
should do
dark
because
Irish
I
humor as well.
I remember there was when I was in college when I was doing the PLC years ago. This guy had an interest in because our college kind of looked like it could be a primary or secondary school if you wanted to use it as a film. It was
Mm.
just classrooms and a computer lab kind of thing, just like small PLC thing. And he had this idea, and I thought it was great. Whereas a kid who gets locked into school and just kind of like explores around. The problem was we didn't have actual kids to use. So he was a kid who was about probably like 19 and he just looks like an adult going around the school. It did get made and it was a fun little kind of like quirky film, like a little short film, but I always like that kind of idea of just like I don't know, a kid kind of like I'm always like as a kid I was always very interested in that and kind of like even like going to the shops and like staying late and like not stealing anything, but just like the idea of being in a shop like after hours or something like that. I always thought
Yeah,
that was like really cool, just like what we kind of don't see or what we don't expect from kind of familiar institutions or buildings or whatever.
yeah. Well, actually, I even remember having this kind of. It was around winter time. We had to clean up Waltons, so we had
Yeah.
to stay back at well after closing time. And the shop just seems bigger. It's
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
But it was actually. I know I don't work there now, so I won't get in trouble. But
I can cut this out if you want.
we we
No, I
clean.
can if you
We,
want.
we did clean. We did clean, but we did mainly play instruments and just sing.
Yeah. And then like your manager comes in next thing, he's like, why is this in drop D? It's like
Oh man, that has actually happened. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But not in bad ways. All the guitars they'd be all tuned by
Yeah,
us
yeah,
from
yeah.
just if it's
Doing like the
quiet,
Sonic
we
Youth
just
tuning.
take the guitar down and just go. Diddly, diddly, diddly. I actually wrote loads of songs while working in Waltons.
That's
I
fascinating, man. I
take
actually
down
really think that's
a
cool.
Martin guitar, go into the back room and just right away.
But dude, that's like that's like those shops like those kind of music shops like Walton's or like any other music shop. I won't use them in particular, but like it is just like a candy shop for musicians, and
Mm.
you would like if you could have if I think if any musician could just have like I don't know a couple of hours to themselves in one of those shops, no employees coming over saying, "Can I help you?"
Yeah.
No one else like listen because like even like I remember one time. I was with a mate in one of the shops in town, and we were playing the riff to "Walk" by Pantera, and we were playing it just joking around. And then someone else like started playing the riff too, like
Join in.
saying,
Yeah.
"Hey," like it was a cool moment, but it's like I don't know, I kind of feel self-conscious, like I don't like bringing stuff out to the world that I haven't mastered yet.
Yeah.
So it'd be so cool just to be able to be like, oh no, this is because like I was once interested in synths. And I'd love, I don't know, I was like, I'm gonna get a Casio because it's just like the classic synth. But then I was looking into it, and people were like, no, get this brand, get that brand if
Mm.
it's your first time, because I wanted to learn I want to learn the keys, and I never got around to it. It's still something that I'd like to do at some point, learn the keys. But I would love to just be able to go into a shop and just be like, okay, this is the kind of sound I want, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to learn the keys as well. Like, kind of know the kind of basic of what it is. Like, know that chord would be C, and
yeah.
but I kind of mainly wing it by sound. Like, because I do have and it was when I released the latest album called Rain.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm playing keyboard on it, and it's a little Yamaha. E236 or something like that.
I'll write that
It's
down.
like a little it's just a little keyboard from, like, it really has this 90s feel to it. It's not that old, but it just reminds me of that, growing up and you'd be messing and
Yeah, I remember going to
playing
Smiths.
chopsticks.
Remember the Smiths up a thing and just playing like on the keys there. I remember that.
Yeah,
And just
yeah.
like bashing on it, man. Just like
Pretty And that's pretty much all I know.
yeah,
It's to bash the keys. And it's like real trial and error things, because I don't really know what I'm doing with the keys, so it's kind of like I'm just hearing it and I'm going, okay, that sounds okay.
yeah.
But I put my stuff on. It was released on Bandcamp, and I've shared the latest album on Reddit. There's a Reddit Bandcamp page, and they're amazing there. Like, I've got so many lovely comments, like, from people on Reddit there for the Bandcamp in particular, like, which is always amazing because I do make music for myself, but it does help when you get some nice comments, like, from people you don't even know.
Yeah.
But one particular guy, and he's tagged as an actual producer, and he's like admiring the synth sounds, as he was saying. He's like, they're really, really good. Like, and I'm like, great, you know.
Yeah.
So I faked it.
Yeah.
I made it ended up sounding nice, like. But like, it's amazing when people say these nice kind of things, and the one of the last ones was for the Rain album. Got loads of reactions for that one, and it's a mad because your little inner insecurities. I'm looking at these comments, and I'm always expecting a but.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, it sounds great, but you could fix this.
Yeah.
But there was, and I'm always expecting that, but it doesn't come. So it's always like a whew, big relief.
Yeah.
It
You know,
sounds good to them.
it's I don't know if this is the same for you, but I've often shared crave things online, and it's always weird when you get the notification. There's always a bit of dread where you're like, oh, here comes the pennies about to drop here, you know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah,
it can be kind of anxiety inducing, like especially if you go away, you're like, okay, I'm putting this up, then you come back and there's like a few notifications. It's weird too because I've had both times, like I've had like one or two notifications and people are into it or whatever. And then like I've also had the other thing where it's like 80 notifications. You're like, oh fuck, and just like, okay, I don't know if that's your experience too.
um, well, see, with me, uh, I'm like, I don't let the notifications build up, because as soon as I see one, I'm like,
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
straight
yeah,
at
yeah.
it. Like, what
See,
are
I
they
can't
saying? What
do
are they
that, man.
saying?
I'm like, I have to get away from this
Yeah.
shit.
Oh, yeah, no, with the, I suppose because you released on camp as well,
Yeah.
and
Well, I don't take that album very seriously, to be clear. I wasn't doing that as any kind of statement of my musicianship. It's very by intention. I think it's quite a poorly produced record on my part,
hmm,
because I was just screwing around basically. But what was good about that record was that I was just like I gave myself like the deadline to the end of January, and I think because if I didn't, I would never have gotten out. I never would have finished it
exactly,
or
yeah.
released it. So I was like, I wanted this out on my 30th birthday, so I just did this like demo, and it wasn't any kind of commercial thing. It was literally just a matter of um I don't know, I just had stuff since I
For
was a
yourself.
teenager. Yeah, it was just like a documentation of my teenage years up until this point, and I guess and I actually had a bunch of other stuff that I didn't put on that record because I had one song that I was like, I think people might take this the wrong way because it was like a satirical song, and I was like, yeah, like through the guise of a character, but I'm like, well, people might take this a little literally. Yeah, might think that I'm actually. For me, it was a critique of kind of macho kind of casual misogyny in music that I was hearing from bands like Guns N' Roses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was taking the piss out of that, and to me, it's quite apparent. But I'm like, nah, people might actually think that this is like my real view, and so like I'll elect not to put that on there.
You could just have a little fine line under the in the title, like, you know.
Satirical.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I hate doing that too because, like, there's a lot of artists I like who put out songs that are potentially divisive, and even all these decades later, like some of these songs are like 40 years, especially like if you're into kind of punk or alternative music where people are trying to make statements. And actually sometimes, like, even when people are kids, when they're like, because like a lot of these people would have started like as teenagers or even in their early 20s, where they're only kind of getting a formation of themselves and how they view the world. And they put out records with kind of declarative statements of, here's what's wrong with politics and here's what's wrong with society or whatever. And it can get a little muddled, like what they're actually saying, and it cannot be reflective of who they are when they grow up. And I don't know, to some degree, like I'm glad those documentations exist, just because the music's good, or whatever. Or even if you fundamentally disagree with what they're saying, there is something to even just being exposed to like different modes of thinking, I guess. But I don't know. Sometimes, like, you get all these things like years later where people are like debating, like, no, this song isn't actually in favor of this thing. It's actually against it. You're just not reading it properly. And then other people are like, how can you say that? Like, hey, he's clearly saying this. And it's just like, it's an interesting discussion, but it's not one that I'm looking to invoke.
Yeah. And it's funny what people kind of do take from songs though, and I think that's kind of like well, I always remember with John Lennon, they're always like some critics were like their songs don't mean anything. And
Mm.
well, they clearly did. So then in retaliation, they're like, I am the walrus.
Yeah.
Cuckoo, choo.
Yeah, I remember
And
that because I think it was someone at New York University was like deconstructing Beatles lyrics, and a student told John Lennon that, and he did that in response. I love that story. It was just that whole song, as far as I'm aware, "I'm the Walrus" was literally just written just to fuck with one guy. He was a
literally,
lecturer.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have because obviously you've been doing this for a long time. You can use specific examples if you want, it's up to you. But do you have songs that you look back on now that you regret the statements you were making in it, or are you kind of happy to stand by everything you've written? I know that's probably a lofty question, but because, like, your music isn't inflammatory or divisive or anything like that, of course. But just in general, I mean, is there anything you kind of go like, I wish I let that kind of um, I wish I kind of formulated that idea better, or I wish I kind of maybe went over that a bit more. Do you have things like that? Because I certainly do with my writing.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I
totally.
don't I
Just like
don't
bad ideas
necessarily. I
on my
think
part.
from uh like I might have a very few political kind of songs. I think probably the closest political song from that I can think of off the top of my head would be one called Echoes of the Past. And that's way back on one of my first releases, the Gathering of Bohemians albums. And that would have been about uh, basically, which could be also relevant today, is feeling like a war is coming kind of thing. It's like an echo of the past. It's like pretty much don't like kind of asking people not to redo World War II. You know,
That would be nice.
that would be very nice. Please don't do that. Echoes of the past. That. But no, I don't regret in any forms of what way I kind of wrote anything really. Most of my songs then after that would be kind of memory, kind of reminiscent songs mainly would be most of what I write about. And most of what I write about is my life, so it's true stuff. So I wouldn't really write of anything of like a point of view where I'm like, uh, I think maybe that's probably some I haven't released that are just not necessarily something I'm regretting, but something I probably need to work on more, which is why it's not released yet. Where there's some about homelessness, like one called Dublin Town, but it's I'm not happy with the song yet, so it's not released.
Yeah, no, totally. Actually, what do you think of this is something I was talking about with another artist, the idea of now that people have full dictation over their music, sometimes artists will go back and delete older tracks, which I don't really like that. I kind of I jokingly referred to it one time as historical revisionism, which was me being facetious, but I do kind of feel like I don't know, like what you put out. It kind of reminds me of like this is a weird comparison, but like the Star Wars, like the old Star Wars, the way George Lucas keeps going back and kind of like redoing them. And I don't know, I kind of feel like once something's out in the world, it's kind of like no longer yours in a way. And if you want to if you want to discuss that like years later, that's a different thing. But like, I don't know, I don't really like the idea of people going back and screwing their old
Trying to
stuff.
rewrite history in a sense. Well, it's
Yeah, kind
I
of.
actually agree with you there because it's like I think it's good to have. I've actually heard a few issues like that. People on Bandcamp they'd be saying, "Oh, the songs I got are gone," and it's just
Yeah,
because the artist probably deleted it, and he's just like, "No, I have a new sound, man."
yeah,
And
yeah,
and it's kind of like but you did that though. You shouldn't take that away of what you've done. It's kind of the
yeah,
same with art as well. I'm like, I'd always be like, don't bin old work. Look at it and see how far you've come. Even George Harrison says, don't trash anything.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no, totally. And I think also I don't know, like it's if nothing else, like you don't know how your music's gonna resonate or your art is gonna resonate with other people. So you could be taking something away from someone that actually means something
it
to
means
them.
something to him. Exactly. You're right. Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that as well. Because
Even if it no longer has relevance to you.
exactly, yeah, it probably does so many. And if you're a lucky enough musician to have somebody that is taking something from your music, like for all I know, there's like one person who keeps listening to my song "Songbird Sings" is probably it's my most listened to song, and that was released on the Gathering of Bohemians. It's my most listened to song on Spotify, and I was just like, thousands of people are listening to it. There's bound to be one person who says, "Oh, I really like that," and that has been listening to it on repeat and goes, "This reminds me of this." And then what if I just took that away? Like,
Yeah.
what if I just take that away and they're just like, oh, it's gone. Oh well, but kind of a bit of
Yeah.
a bummer.
No, that's the thing. It's like, I don't know, I'm going to use a very extreme example here, okay? But let's say hypothetically someone in 2016 was like mad pro-Trump, right? And then years later they're like, actually that doesn't reflect my view and they were making art in that sense. Do you think then they should be able to delete that and go, actually, I think I was propagating dangerous ideas and that I no longer agree with. I think that might be an example where I kind of go, okay, I understand because like well, I would say these songs are documentation. If you feel like the ideas you were disseminating were dangerous or wrong or in any way, maybe then I go, okay, fair enough. But like just in general, if it's kind of a matter of I've moved on, it doesn't mean that like your listeners have or that it doesn't
Exactly.
resonate
Yeah,
with
yeah.
people who are in a similar situation to you. What would you say in that kind of example? Like I know it's an extreme hypothetical, but someone who's it doesn't have to be like Trump or whatever, but just like the idea of someone feeling like the art they were making at one time was somewhat destructive.
Well, like, don't know. It depends. Like, obviously, like you said, I'd agree with you in terms uh of that. Like, but it's kind of hard to say. It's very hypothetical kind of questions.
Yeah.
Like, can I can I think of a person who's actually in this real life situation who has to? I think. Well, actually, one of the things it's like think about it with businesses. One of the things that people if a business does something wrong, one of the best things that businesses can do is own up to them
Yeah.
and learn from them, Uh, and the worst things they do, which is what they all do, is try and hide it
Yeah. Yeah.
and try and pay it off and move on. Forget about it. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. But it's like, but I respect you more if you're admitting it,
Yeah.
a mistake or whatever. Own to it and say, I was wrong. or and but now I'm different. I think
Yeah.
that just to me it just feels more honorable.
Yeah. Yeah, the joke I always say is, Germany's very sorry for World War II, but they're not going to stop selling the Volkswagen.
Yeah. Oh
That's
God.
kind of my little petty thing. Yeah, I remember learning about that in school, like about the history of the Volkswagen, like, and they're still selling it. Just give it a different name. Anyway.
Well, Fanta,
Yeah, yeah,
Coca-Cola didn't
Fanta.
want to tarnish the Coca-Cola name, so they were like, "Hey, why don't you have this new drink called Fanta?"
Yeah.
You
And
know,
then, to me, that's not a big deal if they discontinue Fanta. I'm not a fan.
yeah,
If they discontinue Coke, I'd be like going mental. Like I love me Diet Coke, but yeah, Fanta you can do away with. Although I did like Fanta Exotic back in the day. I don't know. I think that's still around, is it? Fanta
which?
Exotic. Fanta Exotic. It was like the orange drink.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I remember that shit was delish, man.
They feel like real summer drinks. They feel it to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many like again, not to get too nostalgic, but there's so many like great foods and drinks from that time that are just kind of like gone or can't get. When I was down, I'm gonna use a term you're probably gonna hate now, but when I was down the country before, I remember I used to get you couldn't get it in Dublin, but Cadet Cola. There's always these like small 50-cent bottles of it was like I think it was a cola drink from Cavan, and you couldn't get it in Dublin for some reason, but you could kind of get it everywhere else. And I remember like that used to be kind of like a big snack for me. It was like a big treat whenever I'd
Or
leave
if you're on a
Dublin and
trip.
step to Cadet Cola. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I remember going to even if you went somewhere like Wicklow, which isn't even that far out, you could get it, but like you couldn't get it within the county borders for some reason.
Just very select counties, as if
Yeah.
Ireland's massive as well.
Yeah, no, maybe it's just like a matter of actually doing business here. It's just kind of a pain in the ass. Like, nah, screw it.
Yeah, nah.
Or maybe it's just like we hate those stools. I'm like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, that was probably yeah, that's probably it.
What do you find now that you no longer live in Dublin? What do you find now is like kind of the biggest difference you've learned in terms of perspective in life? Because I think for a lot of people come from kind of like cities or even kind of urban areas. Because like obviously we would kind of be from the suburbs, kind of on the outset of Dublin, Dublin City. I mean, it was in the county, but what do you find? Like I find there's this kind of weird romanticization of places where it's like it almost feels like how you hear like people talk about Ireland who aren't from here and they kind of have this like romantic bucolic idea of like the scenery and the locations and things like that, and obviously like you were mentioning Castlebar. I mean that's like it's not a city but it's like pretty close. It's like it's urban, it's more urban than like I think people would.
It's a massive population. Like even
Exactly.
even Bal here, the main road going through Bal, especially at certain times, is backed up. Like
Mhm.
traffic's crazy. But uh, I think the main difference is, one of the things I definitely noticed first was that the Irish government kind of forgot to give the rest of the country public transport.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, no, you're
and
totally right.
better, take stop driving and take public transport. And it's like, but there's none.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
public transport. They only recently added a bus here in Bal. Very
Congrats.
just when we moved up. Yeah, only recently. And I know there's this new plan with the trains, but they don't plan to finish that until 2030 something.
And even then,
Um,
they're focusing on like areas that are already covered. Like, there's this new thing. Oh, there's this 2 hour train from Dublin to Belfast. I'm like, that's great, but like, I do agree. I think like a lot of the rest of the country that are outside these kind of big urban areas like Dublin, Cork, Limerick,
mm,
and maybe even places like I think even Galway gets shafted, even though it's kind of like our fourth biggest city. I think like even they kind
yeah.
of get like shafted a lot too. It's
But
like.
there used to be a train from
Yeah.
Mayo here to Galway, but they got rid. It's an abandoned line now.
Yeah. There's this map I saw one time, and it's really interesting where it showed the rail tracks of Ireland from about I want to say 1920s, and everywhere was covered. It was insane, and like now, and like they have like compared to now, and it is just like I don't want to phrase like this, but where they think people will go, so to speak, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you
no,
think do
because
you
there's
think
loads of
sorry,
beautiful
go ahead.
spots. There's
No,
loads,
you talk.
there's loads of beautiful spots, especially in Mayo here that we've seen and we got to, but we can only get to them by driving.
Yeah.
Like before I was learning to drive, and it's very difficult, especially with nowadays where you have to have someone with you at all times. And I'm just wondering how people who don't have anyone ever learn to drive. Uh, you know, and so we would be trying to get public transport, like, and I would have loved to have gone to Sligo, but I have to go to Dublin first.
Yeah, it's insane. No, and I think I don't know. I've always sort of thought like perhaps like the government, the best thing they could do, not to get too political, but I really do think like the best thing the government could perhaps do is allocate more spending to like do things kind of more locally and give like county governments more say over their infrastructure in a way, because I just think that's kind of the best, because like you know the opposite thing here is like living in Dublin, where I feel like there's too much expenditure on things that are unnecessary. And one thing is that like, you know, there's this new metro line they're proposing for Dublin Airport to the city to make it. But I was looking at the proposed map and I was like, well, all the areas are already kind of well covered by buses and by the Lewis, and like you could just, you know, like rather than waste all this money like building this metro thing, you could just like, you know, put more money into the already existing services and like, you know, have like 24-hour transport from the airport to the city center, and
Yeah,
kind of the areas you're mapping out, just make a new bus
and
line.
maybe even security, because I
That'd be
know
nice.
that when I was living in Tallaght, they had to stop buses going into
Yeah.
Tallaght when I was living there, because
Good
the
old
bus drivers
27
was
route.
getting attacked.
Nice.
And it was very unfortunate. And it's like, I can't really blame them for cutting off at a certain time,
Yeah.
putting their life
Yeah.
in danger. Uh, but that only happened in recent years. Like, people always talk this madness about Tala, oh, Tala's like this war zone. But I
Yeah.
just remember growing up and just like being fine.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
I guess it depends on the area. I mean, there's definitely I've known people from various areas of Tala, and they definitely have different relationships with
Like,
it. I think we're
yeah,
from a
yeah,
very fortunate area of Tala, which I don't take for granted. But it's like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I do think like again, like a lot of things like about like kind of no one ever wants to address the questions of like, okay, but why has it gotten like that? Like, you know, is
Yeah.
it a matter of education? Is it a matter of lack of social services? I think a huge thing for kids is like not having any kind of legitimate resources, because everything here is just catered to people who are over 18 who can drink basically.
Basically, yeah, yeah,
And you know, every like all the kind of structure for teenagers is just hanging around, you know,
yeah.
and sometimes that can lead to antisocial behavior, and there's no real attempt to try and redress that, in my opinion. It's you know, people just want to go, oh, we need more guards, which I understand as a temporary provision, but at the same time, like, yeah, but there's a deeper issue here too,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like let's address that at the same time, like, you
That's
know,
true. Because I
so,
would agree. Because I know, like, definitely we would have been not only all right because of where we were in Tallaght, but also we probably would have preferred to stay at home and write stories
yeah,
or play video games or something. So less chances of us hanging out in
yeah,
places. But no, I definitely like even some of my other brothers, like they would have been. One of them in particular got in a lot of trouble when he was younger, and got in the sights of wrong people,
yeah.
and so even if we were in, it didn't really matter. Like, it's just it depends on the person as well. Like, what is very unfortunate to kind of come across these wrong people, but
That's the thing, you never know, like, you know, because you could be hanging out with someone who's totally normal, and then just by extension, you get pulled into these weird, like,
into these
little
weird
things. Yeah,
situations, or yeah,
it's very unfortunate, and I think it can happen to anyone too. So I'm not in any way being sanctimonious about this, because I do think like it can happen to anyone, and you know, again, it's just a matter of like how do we kind of address that?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it kind of happens even from what I've heard from here since I've come to. the countryside.
Yeah. You
It's
big culty. No, I'm joking.
yeah. The thing is,
You know,
um,
for years I didn't know that was an offensive term. I swear because people here used to say culty as like a descriptor, and I was in school one time and someone used the term, and a teacher, I don't know where he was from, but he wasn't from Dublin, gave out to them for using it, and I was like, oh, I guess this is an offensive term. I didn't
yeah.
know.
Well, it's understandable when you're a kid,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I was
you know,
18. No, I'm joking.
yeah, you're still a kid. That's still a
I'm
kid.
still
You're still learning. But
I wasn't quite that old.
what was it? Oh yeah, like from what I heard from when I moved over here, it was the same kind of issue where it's like not really much to do for kids. So they out in the country, it's either they got into driving cars, so they're interested in cars or or
Yeah,
even both. So a lot of the time, Kira was saying, my wife was saying when she was here growing up like that, the lads would just drive around, literally just drive, and
yeah,
that was their day.
yeah.
Like
Well,
what do you
even
want to
then,
do
you have to
today?
be.
Just drive up the road and back.
Even then, with driving, you still have to be like 17. So it's like, even then, you're still basically an adult on the precipice of adulthood anyway. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I find it really fascinating. How do you find that geography affects your writing, your art in any way?
Well, actually, funnily enough, the latest album was entirely inspired by Mayo.
Yeah,
The whole west of Ireland kind of feel. So I kind of wanted to write that in an album, really, because I've always kind of wanted to have this kind of Irishness in an album, and I guess there always is because I'm Irish. But uh, I wanted the topic to be about that kind of thing with the landscape and the just what it makes me feel as well sometimes. So that's what that, and obviously the album is called Rain,
yeah.
about Ireland. See, but so that was kind of the entire album of that of Rain is just all of to sing about like Westport, even at the beaches I go to. There's a beautiful beach just up near Sligo called Ross's Beach, and it's a beautiful spot. Like it's on its own little dome, and no one else can find it.
Yeah, yeah.
Damn it, they'll find it now. But it's there's loads of spots like that, and I just especially the first time I moved here, it was like a shock to the system because you know even in between living in Tala and Mayo here, I lived in Maynooth as well,
Mhm.
and it's a very student town, so it was quite loud, and so it was a massive difference, a real drinking culture in Maynooth. When I don't drink, so it was kind of very irritating for me. But
Mhm.
the when I came here, it's just the peace, you know, that peace and the quiet and the nature. Literally last night, the loudest thing I'll hear is either cows or the fox screaming, you know, and it's just it's kind of a relief to the system in so many ways. And that's what I wanted to write about with Rain. That entire album is just all basically kind of an ode to Mayo, you know. But
Yeah, actually, it's something maybe it's just because we're a few days from Halloween, but I'm actually interested in how do you find the kind of festive seasons in Mayo compare in that kind of setting of things like Halloween, things like Christmas, Paddy's Day, Easter, any of the kind of like big celebrations in Ireland.
so what's it actually seems to be more of a togetherness in the country than there
Yeah,
is in when I was in Dublin. Uh, in Dublin, it was, and especially in Tala, we were getting shot at by fireworks,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
I
kind
can
of
relate.
like
I've
get
just been here.
down, get down, kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
you know, uh,
I'll tell you one thing they don't have anymore, bonfires. You don't see them anymore.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Fireworks massive, but like yeah, it's funny because like I go to the old spots where they used to have even like because I remember like even in September you see kids collecting firewood already, and you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
don't see that anymore. It's just like I think the guards like kind of shut a lot of that down. So if you want to see that, I guess you have to go north in June.
Yeah, yeah, true. Bonfires, yeah. They, I think
You're like, I disagree. I just like the bonfire. I just like the warmth.
yeah.
You're there the whole time. Like,
Tut 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 tut.
I remember I once see. Do you remember that movie, The Help? It was about it was about segregation in the US in the 60s, and it was about uh, uh like the white kind of people who'd have like black maids and like the kind of
Right.
racism discrimination they'd face.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that in the cinema when it was out, and I was sat beside these two because it was like the last cinema was out in Dunleary. It was like the only place that was still showing it, and it was a packed screen. I remember, and I sat beside these nice old ladies, and every time something racist would happen in the film, they go like very loudly. And I was kind of concerned to them. Go, listen, we know you disavow. You don't have to do that every time. You're not meant to be agreeing.
So that's actually it's funny with the cinema because it's very common like that. You know, we always, every time me and Kira are going for the cinema, we try and go on a quiet day because there are always people who think out loud. It's like they're talking to you while they're watching the movie. It's like,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I find since COVID, man, people's I love going to cinema. I go to cinema a lot, but since
Yeah,
COVID, if you unless you go to like a particular like art house cinema where people are respectful, if you just go to like a major cinema, um uh. Everyone's just like on their not on their phones, but like people are definitely texting sometimes, or they're
yeah,
just talking out loud. Or being, especially if you go to anything that's like rated 12, that like even if it's not for kids, that kids can go see. Kids
yeah,
will always sneak in. I went to see last year. I went to see that new Indiana Jones movie, and these kids just snuck in, and they got kicked out kind of early, so it wasn't too bad. But it's just like,
yeah.
shut up.
Yeah, no, it's. I agree. I mean, definitely after COVID, especially it was that. But and even there's also one of the most annoying ones is the comedian.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
The
hilarious.
George Costanza who kind of has to comment on the
He has
film
to
they're
comment
watching.
on everything.
Yeah,
It's like, what are you doing here?
yeah.
Don't,
It's
don't.
awkward self. Even like I find even libraries now it's so annoying because like a lot of libraries I go to are like one is actually near actually Tala. It's near
It's.
the secondary school. The one opposite. It's not the one that we
I
would have
thought
grown
that
up
one
with.
closed down.
That one did close down. They opened a new one, and it's even closer. So sometimes
Oh,
you get kids there, which is fine. But they have the big library in Tala near the square, and even then, kids will go to that, and it's just like I'm just trying to do some. I'm trying to either read or do some work or whatever, and there's always just
hmm.
kids being like really loud. I'm like, guys,
Shh.
stop. But I
Have
find
you
like
ever
since
seen
COVID,
any
man.
movie about a library? Like,
But I find since COVID, man, just like even like I don't know if it's the same for you, man, but like when I go on public transport, there are people blaring TikToks or people like, and it's the worst. Like dude, I was on a bus one time, and there was uh like it wasn't a kid, it was like it was a woman, and it was like and she's just like on, I think it was like YouTube Shorts, and she's just flicking between reels, and you're just hearing constantly. Ba 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 ba
yeah,
ba 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 ba. I was like, shh. Oh, it drives me insane, man.
yeah.
Like even you put in your earphones, it only drowns out so much, you know?
That no, I have noticed that because even like I don't get much public transport anymore now that I've
Right.
got the license. But the before uh COVID, I had public transport every day for work and stuff like that. And people usually like this, just kind of like to themselves, unless there's their special occasion where there's some madman. But yeah, no, there's definitely been a change. I think people got a bit confused after COVID.
Their
It
wires
kind of
got
messed
crossed
with a
from.
lot of people's heads, I
Yeah.
think. And because when you do think about it, it would mess some people up. Like even you were saying you were getting a little bit of cabin fever of sorts,
Yeah, yeah.
But and there's other people, who I could imagine who just would not be able to cope, whatever. And I would say that's long lasting.
Yeah.
effects on them, you know?
I
Mm.
also think about the kids who were raised during COVID, like what, because a lot of the kids say, like, if I'm going to a film, it's like, well, if they were, say, 4 years old when COVID happened, they're eight now, and it's like, I don't know, like, what does that do to you, like to someone who's kind of like had such formative years, like having to be indoors, and then like, and also, I don't know if you know this, but like, primary schools start like later now than when we were. It's like we would start when we were like four, and now kids are starting at five. And it's interesting because I'm talking to people now who have kids, and it's like, oh no, he's not in primary yet. He's only four. I'm like, oh well.
Really? I
Yeah,
I
they start
start
they
well
start at
I
five
was
now.
in apparently my mom was told I was too young. I
Yeah,
think I had just turned four.
yeah. You're one of
It
the
was in
youngest in the
May
class, if
I
I remember
turned four. So
correctly.
that's why in every year I was always the youngest. And
Yeah,
I would turn the proper age at the end of the year.
yeah.
But yeah, that's mad. Like I couldn't
I
imagine.
find that really fascinating. Like, some of them are even probably turning six when they start primary school, which is,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's like I remember we did our communion when we were eight and things like that. And
yeah,
it's just
eight,
like,
yeah, yeah.
it just feels like, I don't know. I don't know. If it works, it works. I'm not trying to say anything, but like I remember like it worked. Like you start secondary school at four, and then you're 18 when you're out. Now I was 17 when I left secondary because when I did leaving cert because I didn't get into TY in my school. It was funny, you apply for TY, and pretty much everyone got in because you just said yes to everything. So the head of the TY would be like, so this is the type of stuff we do. We do rock climb, we do walks, we go to the cinema sometimes. That sounds interesting to you, and you just go, yeah, yeah, because I just wanted to
Yeah.
put off the leaving
I think
cert
I
for a
remember
year.
I
So
remember you saying
yeah,
last
so
time as well.
you just say yeah, yeah to everything, and then like
Yeah.
so everyone gets in, then it's just like literally draw of a hat. So I was a little young when I left, when I did leave cert, but generally it was like 4 to 18, and now it's like I guess five, even six to I guess 18, and I'm just like, what happened those 2 years? Well, at least 1 year, I don't know, unless like what if you just like got rid of junior and senior infants and you just start first class? Would that
First,
work? I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe that is how they're doing it now. I don't know.
Yeah, because it's like for me anyway, I'm like the sooner I'm out of school, the better. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
like
I didn't like school though.
please don't extend school for anybody.
Yeah, yeah. Do you find like because a lot of your, as you mentioned, the music you're making is very reflective of your life. Have you kind of divorced nostalgia from kind of as best you can objectively observing your past? Because no one's ever going to truly do that. I mean, like there's always going to be subjectivity when you view the past, and one thing I find very interesting is when you communicate with people and uh, as an adult you look back on things, it's sort of therapeutic in a way when you look back at things as a kid, and you kind of have the because I think when you experience something as a kid, your childlike limitations kind of cement even through adulthood, and it's not really until you start talking about it, you're like, actually maybe that wasn't what I thought it was. How do you kind of divorce nostalgia from trying to be objective, and just in general? I mean, do you care about objectivity? I mean, are you kind of like, no, this is art, this isn't documentation in like a literal sense?
Well, it's it's very interesting because it's like I tend to reminisce a lot, and especially recent years as well. A lot of my music would be very reminiscent, and it's also because of that, trying to be. I'm trying to remember. I was trying to remember things right, like that, because there's a lot of recent stuff going on where my with my dad, and as some of my songs would actually talk about, but
Right.
it's this whole kind of thing of now that I'm an adult, I'm remembering certain things, and it's like maybe he wasn't as nice as the kid me was telling me, you know? So I have memories that are kind of like coming back, and it's like, okay, so he wasn't a nice guy, you know? So it kind of memories kind of seem to change their subjective kind of views as you age going through life. Like that's why some people would actually end up stop talking to a parent after they had a kid themselves
Mm.
because they're which was fine before, but then once they have a kid but them set for themselves, they go, "Whoa, I would never treat my kid like that. They weren't a good person." And then they
Right.
suddenly stop talking. So it's kind of like memories can be funny like that. They can kind of change as you experience life more and more. And I guess uh, with my music, uh, I uh, I kind of I guess missed that kind of innocence. So I wanted to kind of show that in the music that I had fantastic memories with my brothers and stuff like that. And obviously, every family has issues and stuff like that, but a lot of it is almost tainted because
Yeah.
of our dad, you know, uh, and what can be usually very common with people is, you know, nothing's black and white. So someone who is a bad person can do good things. You can have good memories with them. So your mind is constantly battling these kind of memories, being like, wait a minute, I'm trying to simplify things here for you. A
Right.
bad person is a bad person and a good person is a good person, but it's a lot trickier, a lot more complicated. So that's why I would have, a song like a song that I wrote called Pretending to Drive. And that was about, I released that about twice, but it would have been on one of the albums from this year. And that one is more of a kind of, miss my dad in a sense. Pretending to Drive would be a good memory of him. And then there would be another song that is like uh, My Father.
Yeah.
That was released on One for Sorrow in January. And
Yeah, we
that
talked about
one
that at
would
the time.
be not about good memories. You know, even though I don't say a lot of things lyrically, it's definitely what I'm thinking about
Mm.
while singing that and while I was writing it. But so it's with and Jenny, as you said earlier at the start, I released 14 albums this year. So
Yeah.
so that was quite a writing endeavor because my main kind of target was to basically improve my recording and mixing skills,
Yeah.
and that's why I wanted to just keep making songs, and so I was doing a lot of sitting down and writing and remembering a lot of things. So a lot of things were coming back, and a lot of things were that I thought were forgotten were coming back. So it's kind of music is amazing like that the way it works. So 14 albums, I beat my challenge, the music challenge. As the first time we talked, I said that to you. I was like, I have a music challenge this year to
Yeah.
release
Yeah.
an album for each month, and and I did it then. So it was
Do
a
you,
bit of fun. I don't think I'll
it,
do it again,
no, no.
but
Rest, get
because
sleep.
it actually made the year fly by, man. I don't know how that happened, but it was like how I was waiting for each month to come to release an album. It just made the months fly by so
Mm.
fast that like when I'm doing a painting, I sign the year, so 24. It
Hmm.
feels like I'm only getting used to that year now of signing
Yeah.
of signing the right year.
Right.
And now
It's
it's
like
going to
in
change.
January when you always put the wrong year.
Yeah.
Fuck.
But I do
That's
have, yeah, Jenny,
it's
14 albums.
perpetual
So,
January for you.
but I do have the whole list there. So you won't see this on the podcast, but you can see the
Yeah.
whole list. That's all the list of albums released this year.
If you go
So
to his Spotify, you can see it
yeah,
all. If you go to Two for Joy Spotify, you can see the list for
you
yourself.
can see that list there.
And you can listen to the music and maybe go to his Bandcamp and buy the music too and
and
support
and
local artists.
but so and
There's your
that
plug.
that kind of songwriting kind of challenge was the whole project was to be reminiscent, in my
Yeah.
songwriting. So that's why there's kind of a double meaning to the word as they're titled home recordings. so most of the albums are called home recordings and then month, year. Uh, but an album that is actually going to come out in January is kind of what these all were meant to be. So what I do is when I'm writing an album, I write a bunch of songs, and then I pick what ones are going to be on it, kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah.
so what happened this year was, instead of picking, I released them all. So, but now the official home album is going to be out in January. That was the ones that were picked. That was what was going to be the one album, but it was divided into 14 albums then, uh, because basically just release everything, so I could beat that challenge I made for myself. Like, and the
Are
home
you
album.
revisiting songs, or like with the albums, with the songs you put out so far? I mean, have they been kind of like, because when you're doing like, I can't even imagine like that kind of output where you're doing that many songs and you're doing like full albums worth like monthly basically. And I was wondering like how many kind of like drafts of each songs have you done? Do you listen back now and go, when it comes to the final home album that you're discussing, are you going to uh, redo any of them, or is there anything you'd like to shape up, or are they going to just be kind of a selection of the best songs?
Uh, it's kind of a selection of the best songs, really. I have done a few songs more than once and released some more than once because there was something different I wanted to do with it. Like one song in particular would be called Shadows, and that was actually released on the Rain album. Um, but it was originally released way back in like 2018 with the Gathering of the Bohemians. Uh, I think it was actually no, even before that. Even before that, this was where even well before it was released on an album called Movie Tracks, and that was when there was more than one me. There was Aaron and Aaron
Yeah,
and
the other Aaron that you got from
uh,
Facebook.
Aaron number two and Killian. There was the three of us, and that was when I released The Shadows. But I wasn't happy with the vocals,
Yeah.
so I ended up redoing it recently then, uh, which I'm much happier with. And I guess when I'm recording, I kind of just have this kind of basic kind of set. I write the song out and I have this kind of structure, and I record acoustic first, and then I record vocals over it.
Mhm.
So it's because it's easier to mix that way.
Right.
Uh, and then after that, I just add on anything else, usually harmonica or banjo or even the keyboard now. Now that
Yeah.
I can bang those keys.
Well, I think it's great that like you're still like, even now, like with all this work you've done, you still find the need to kind of expand as an artist, and you mentioned learn more instruments. I don't know, like we talked before, and you were a self-taught musician. Do you I don't know, study like music theory? Does that thing kind of interest you? And just in general, like what do you find is important to kind of expand your knowledge in that sense, in terms of getting familiar with different instruments, and in terms of I don't know, trying to see what you can do. I'm not going to ask you this now. I'm going to ask you after, but I also want to talk about the production. But just speaking with just being a musician at the moment, why do you think it's important to expand your capabilities still to be constantly doing that?
I think in any for any musician, I wouldn't say there's a bad way of expanding ever.
Yeah.
You just in any way you can expand is always the best way. The way I personally myself, uh, I wouldn't be much on theory kind of stuff because my head just doesn't go there. Uh,
Yes.
so I usually just have to do things, physically do things. So what, you know, with the harmonica, I had never like again self-taught, but basically how I taught myself to play the harmonica would have been whistling. So
Hmm.
like, but with whistling, when I whistle, I blow and I draw. So with that. I was able to kind of get the idea of the harmonica, and then I got the keys, and that would probably be the closest I would go to theory. But that's very, very important theory is the
Yeah.
keys, because that is probably the most important thing. You know, you don't want to be playing in the wrong key, so be playing, uh, and obviously, with the harmonica, it's like a half step on the key on the. So if I have the capo on the acoustic, I would go up for
Yeah.
two for each one. So that was kind of like the kind of things that made it easier to be able to kind of add more instruments.
Yeah.
And the more instruments you played, the better. And that was for me personally, especially because I write a lot. So I do want to record a lot.
Hmm.
And one of the issues with me when I was starting out as a musician was waiting for other people to get up off their butts to make the music with me or whatever. So, or even do some mixing, because especially in the production side of it, I was not anywhere near what I'm doing now, and obviously I still have a long way to go. But I, you could see a different, you could definitely hear a difference if you listen to uh, my first produced album, self-produced album would have been the Ryan Ennis album,
Hmm.
and that was back in 23. Uh, and if you listen to that one, to the album, it's a huge difference in the quality, definitely. You know,
Yeah.
and that was the target. That was the kind of target, of 24, was to record as much and improve in that recording. You know,
Yeah, I thought the funny thing is, when we talked last, you were sort of talking about like, yeah, self-producing. Actually, it might have been the first time we talked. I can't remember exactly, but because we talked in 23 and then we talked in January this year, so it was about a year gap. So I can't remember which interview it was, but I spoke to you before and you were kind of talking about production being a new thing that you're kind of getting into, for that kind of autonomy as we're speaking about, where you're like, I don't want to be relying on other people for it. I want to be able to kind of do it myself. And you were talking about, the challenges of it, like EQing. I remember you mentioned were kind of like something that you were uncertain of, like in terms of like, I think it can be quite overwhelming when you're learning a DAW and when you're learning to do these
yeah,
things for the first time. But I think your production is really stellar. I mean, like, your album, Solas Fair, I thought was like everything was just like pitch perfect. There was no fault that I could see on it at all from a production standpoint, obviously. And I was wondering like if you could talk about maybe your journey in terms of becoming a producer, and something I was also interested in asking, would you ever consider producing for other artists?
eh? I would always. I would do it as a favor, definitely. I would
Sure.
produce other artists who are looking for, if they don't have the ability to record themselves, I would love to help them, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, but I would definitely show them how what I'm doing, because one of the best things that you could be shown as an independent musician is not to rely on others, uh, and to just learn it yourself. Because if I can do it, anyone can. Because I was always relying on others, and for me, when I'd be looking at other musicians who could produce their own stuff, and I'm like, wow, how are they doing that? But yeah, Solas Fair, I was actually one of the that was one of the ones I was most happy with, uh,
Yeah.
especially
I
with.
think it's the strongest production wise, I think, so far.
Yeah, I agree actually as well. I was really happy with that one, because if I was to make a physical copy of any, I would definitely go with Solas Fair first. Solas Fair was definitely a personal favorite, especially the songs on it. Just quality wise, uh I really liked it, really enjoyed making it, because it not only was it Solas Fair is like an escape album, uh, this whole thing. This Solas Fair is this kind of concept thing I made up for it. Obviously, there's probably things out there that are like this, but for me, it was a made up festival, and it's a
Yeah.
festival of lights and all sorts of things. And that was that the painting I did was to show. Uh, that kind of what was in my head, and the painting is the cover. with the fireworks and the lanterns and everything, and then there's the musicians and stuff. It's um, just this festival where people kind of uh, are just able to be themselves and enjoy the moment and enjoy the music and enjoy the lights and escape the troubles of life. And that's
Yeah.
why most of the songs, bar the first song on the album, is not about the troubles. Like the first song on the album is Parked Car Conversations, and that's actually about my dad, and that's about sitting basically over me and my wife. We would park in Tesco and after shopping, and we'd be sitting there, and we'd literally just be talking, sitting in the car talking, and it would be about the troubles of things that are getting to us and stuff like that, and that's and funny enough, I actually saw there was a similar park car conversations. There was Picture This actually released in the same year of the same title, uh, but I don't know if their thing is about the same thing. But what mine was
Sure.
about was literally my time of sitting in the car and talking about uh, basically how I felt and stuff like that. And that park car conversation is about me telling them that, you know, I'm singing about you in the car. I'm talking about you in the car. But other than that, the rest of the songs are all kind of like just a kind of they're different. They're more of a about there's an instrumental called Last Light, and it's just me playing the banjo. Uh, the Solas Fair song literally describes what the album is all about. And it's just about escape. Just
I think that was my favorite on the album as well, the title track. I think like you really succeeded with that record in creating an atmosphere, and for what it's worth, is my opinion as a listener, is that I do think that atmosphere, that kind of like sense of being part of like a fair, it really does come across. Like I think that's like probably why it's my favorite of your work, production was, that I think it has this kind of continuity in this streak, that it's very much a concept album in that sense, and I think it really does come across. It has this real, my interpretation, has this real kind of like n- feel of like, when you're a kid, this is a weird thing, but when you're a kid and you get to stay up late and go to like something, and there's a real sense of community when you're at these like big events, and kind of everyone's sort of jolly and things like that. It really invoked that for me of kind of being a small child, and being up late, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
think when you're a kid, nighttime has this like real kind of sexy appeal to it that
yeah,
now as an adult, like nighttime is just kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of a thing you take for granted. It's not something that has any kind of romanticism to it anymore, in my opinion.
yeah,
I think when you're a kid, like getting to stay up late and getting to do things and not feel tired is
yeah.
something we
No,
take for
yeah,
granted. Where now, once I don't know how old you were, but for me, it was probably when I was like 20, not maybe even younger, maybe like 16 even, like nighttime and daytime just seem, I don't know, inconsequential. Maybe even earlier than that, honestly, man. Maybe even like probably about 12. And it's funny now, I'm reminiscing too. But
yeah.
like that time, that's there's a period in your life, I think, where daytime and nighttime kind of blend, and there's no sense of like I'm doing things at night. Because like Halloween is a good example of that, where you're like, yeah, I'm out trick or treating and the lights are on, and it's just this like real sexy thing. I don't know, or even like
No, I
I
know
remember,
exactly what you mean because I'm always actually trying to say the same thing, and
yeah,
it's always hard to explain it to people because sometimes it feels like, it's amazing that because I'm hearing you say that because I always feel like that, and it's like, is anybody remembering the same thing here? And
yeah,
it's because I'm
yeah,
trying to describe sometimes there's this certain, probably why this time of year is probably my favorite time of year is because there's more darkness in the day, so it
mm,
actually takes me back to when I was a kid, and you know, if you're being brought from school or something, and for some reason it's dark while you're in
yeah,
school, and it just reminds me of us being uh, 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 kind of like just in primary and being a kid, and we're like making Halloween scary
Decorations,
pictures,
yeah,
like
yeah,
putting making bats and pumpkins, and there was just this a darker light in the day, and
yeah.
it just has that reminiscent feel. And that is actually, it's funny that you take that from that album, because that was kind of what I was kind of going for, is that kind of feel, that kind of time of year, you know.
Well, it's funny because like when I was a kid, I hated going to mass. I just didn't
Yeah,
like it. I found it
same.
very boring. But Christmas mass was always interesting because we'd do it in the evening, and it was just like, first of all, there was a nice sense of community, just like everyone kind of there, like it was
Mm,
basically the entire state. And then, but then like leaving, and it's just like nighttime, and especially because we used to go on Christmas Eve, and just like, oh, in a couple of hours, Santa will be here and things like that. And even like around this time, you would have the park nearest Time Park used to have like a festival. No, no, what was it? They used to have a carnival, and it would be like all these rides and stuff like that, and they'd sometimes also have a circus. I remember going to
I
that in the
remember
big
that,
tent,
yeah.
yeah. And I know, and even then, like there was just something nice about like the um just this like grassy area in the park that was sort of inconsequential in most times. Being kind of transformed into this kind of magical, interesting thing where I remember the music and it was so loud and the lights and just even like the like the imagery of like they'd always paint like the Men in Black or some weird shit on the
Yeah.
sides. It would always be like even though it's like totally like irrelevant. There was this great meme. I always think of that they don't do them anymore. I think they moved location, but they still do them, but it's just in a different place. But like there's this image someone painted one time of Elvis being uh kind of dissected by aliens, and someone joked, this is the type of stuff you see on the side of carnival rides, and it's true. It's just these like random assortment of images of like Marilyn Monroe and like the Men in Black is what's coming to my mind, but just like or like Dennis the Menace, or just like random
Just the most
weird
random kind of
iconography.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I don't know, there's something about that where it's like we're going to this fair, and like I don't know, it's I think especially kind of like in big city living and in urban living, there's a sense of detachment where you're walking these kind of gray sort of nameless faces, and sometimes like just having some kind of thing like that can just be very attractive. I think, especially when you're a child, it's just like kind
Yeah.
of it's the stuff that sticks with you. Like I even like think of like it's funny, like when I think of childhood, I do think of nighttime a lot more.
Yeah,
Like or
same, same.
sleepovers is a good example as well,
Sleepovers,
where
yeah.
it's just something about just something transgressive about it as a kid of being like I'm awake at night. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, even it's just this whole mystery of when you're a kid, the world is still a mystery, and
Yeah,
everything's big, you know, and it's like seeing things for the first time, and it's definitely something I do reminisce about. And it's nice to have that, nice to be able to reminisce about things like that, because obviously not everyone is as fortunate, but it's just trying to put the words to it. Well, like,
yeah.
what is it like?
Maybe
Is
sometimes
it
it's
just
good not to have words
nostalgia?
to it. Well, maybe sometimes it's good not to have words for it. Maybe sometimes it's good just to invoke things that just have a sense. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, true, yeah.
One thing I'll try not to take up too much of your time. We've been very gracious.
Oh, thank
I
you for
just want to
having
ask.
me.
Oh, dude, absolutely anytime. But I just want to ask actually, as a writer yourself, I mean, obviously your music is very personal. It reflects a lot on your past, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. But when it comes to say fictional writing, when it comes to more kind of autobiographical writing, what kind of inspires you in terms of like going, here's where I'm going to be a bit more literal and a bit more self-reflective, and here's where I'm going to just completely escape into fantasy. Because it's interesting, because like your shelf behind you has like a lot of fancy books. I noticed the Yellow Spines, which is often the sci-fi
Yeah.
thing. Like I forget the
Oh,
is it what's the publishing house again? I can't think of the name, but I know I have like things like that. See there the see on, well, the bottom shelf that I can see here.
These the
Yes,
Masterworks.
yes. I have yes, the sci-fi masterworks. I have a few of them. I have Letters for Alderaan, or sorry, Flowers for Alderaan, and a couple of others in that thing. I think I have what's his name? Neuromancer. What's that guy? William Gibson. I think I have one of his books or something in that style. So I've kind of like looking at them, like, I look at the spines. But just in general, I mean, like, obviously you're very influenced by kind of fantasy and science fiction in terms of what you like to read as a reader. So what kind of inspires you as a writer?
As well, before I say that, I would probably even go uh, because with fantasy actually reminded me something there because there's this album idea I've always wanted to do, and this is probably why I'm trying to get my production stuff kind of better. Is and I it would definitely need more instruments, so I would definitely need more like a better electric kind of lead guitarist and stuff like that. But I've always wanted to kind of do a kind of fantasy album.
A space opera kind of
Like
thing?
kind of maybe like imagine if Lord of the Rings was actually an album, you
Yeah.
know, something like that. It's a story that's actually told with music and lyrics, like kind of like War of the Worlds, that album with Phil Lynott on it.
Yeah, I can't think of the album. There's an album I'm going to recommend to you later. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's kind of exactly. I think it'd be very much in your wheelhouse. You're probably already familiar with it, but it kind of it incorporates kind of the childhood banality of primary school with like fantasy elements. I can't think of the
Right.
name of it off the top of my head, but I will send it to you afterwards.
Yeah. Um, but to answer your question anyway, for
Yeah, sure.
the writing, uh see I don't actually write much. Like that would be uh like the only one I'd be happy enough to show anybody really is this one kind of. The other one
Beyond
I'm
Heaven Hill.
not too happy with. But the Between Heaven and Hell, yeah, that would be the one I'd be kind of okay with having someone show. But that would, and I guess probably because there's more of my own life inspirations in it. Like I was taking, I was really taking the write what you know literally with that. Uh, so there was inspirations from school, growing up, and uh, there's this scene about a uh an abandoned biscuit factory,
Oh,
which
Jacobs,
would
yeah.
have been like Jacob's
hmm
factory in
Which
Tallaght.
is no longer there. I think it's an
No
Amazon
longer
plant
there
now.
now, yeah. But and the whole thing in the book is that these kids are talking about it, and it's haunted to them and stuff like that, and the ghosts are in there, and this they dare one of the kids to go in, and he actually gets hurt, but not by a ghost. There's an actual like a crazy person in there who's like trying to take him. But
Even that was a rumor. I remember there was a neighbor who I think actually legitimately had mental health issues near where I live. But at the time, people used to call her the witch. I actually feel very bad looking back on it now because I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, I just like now as an adult looking back on it, I just see a person suffering really. But
mm,
as a kid, you kind of just believe in the mythology.
yeah, that's it. So as a kid, the world is kind of full of monsters. But you know, funny enough, there are monsters, but they can be human. But they can also be broken people. You know,
Yeah,
like that. And the world is a bit simplified when you're a kid like that. So it's
because
kind of like a bit more
this
black and
particular
white.
neighbor I'm talking about, like, the reason people used to call her a witch was she would steal shit. She would steal. When I was a kid, I don't even have any memory of this, but I had a toy that apparently got stolen by her, and kids would get like their football stolen and things like that. I think she had some kind of like kleptomania. That was a
Right.
result of it. But like looking back now, I'm not. I'm just sympathetic, but I understand from a kid, that's just how I think a lot of it's actually mythologizing the world. One thing I think is very interesting about what you're saying, when you're talking about your dad and stuff like that, and I think it's totally true, is that it's kind of Nietzsche in the sense that there is no good and evil. We're kind of everyone's a flawed, complex character, and even if you think about yourself as an individual, like I'm capable of doing bad things, but I'm capable of doing good things, and I wouldn't
Mm.
necessarily say I'm a good or a bad person. I think there are plenty of people who, when they're tested, kind of freeze up really,
Mm.
in kind of like people don't really have those kind of big dramatic moments a lot of times in life to really prove themselves that again you see in films or you see in books.
Exactly.
Do you think that's made you more interesting as a writer in terms of being able to see the world in shades of grey rather than kind of simplify, romanticize kind of Hollywood view of good and evil, like superhero versus villain kind of thing.
But that's that's actually it's funny that you say that because it's like it reminds me of I don't know if you've ever read Salem's Lot.
No, I haven't read much King beyond that. Actually, I've only read
Really?
on writing. I wanted to read The Stand because I thought it was very interesting, but
I haven't read that
haven't
one
got
yet,
around to
but
it.
I'm waiting to dive into it because it's about
Yeah,
this
yeah.
guy. But
It's the size of the Bible, basically.
yeah, but this wouldn't be like a spoiler or anything. Which it seems I definitely recommend reading it because it's definitely one of his best. I flew through it as well, so it was really enjoyable. But there's a priest in it, and what you're saying there is kind of reminds me of what he would, says in the book in the book. Uh, Basically on the gist of he basically hates that life isn't like good versus evil because he wants this he wants the adventure kind of thing. He wants
Yeah,
that kind of that fight to take down evil. But what life had taught him was that it's not like that, and that there are bad people who do good things and good people who do bad things. So he's not, and for him, from what life has told him, there is no such thing as evil. So he's kind of going, ah,
yeah. Especially because, like, with kind of Christian archetypes, it's devil and God.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So I thought that was that what you said there reminded me exactly like that, yeah, of that, and it's an interesting point because you know, as a kid, when we're kids, it's kind of like that. There's a good and evil. There's
Yeah.
the God and the devil,
I
and
think I think sometimes like to kind of be sympathetic. I mean, sometimes we teach kids in those sense because we're trying to keep them out of harm. We're trying to
exactly.
protect them. And I
Mm,
understand why sometimes we oversimplify things like that for
mm,
their understanding so that they don't get. I remember, dude, like it's funny, like I look back at like a lot of my childhood and a lot of the fear around pedophilia and kind of
yeah.
people kidnapping you. There was a rumor going around the kid, but I think like when you put that to a kid's side, I remember, I don't even know if you remember this, but when we were in primary, there was this rumor about this van and someone going around kidnapping
The
kids and
white
all
the white
this.
van with
The white
stripes.
fan with stripes, yeah, I think it was a green stripe if I remember
So
correctly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I remember that, and I used to have literally have nightmares about that,
And
about
there
getting
was a
kidnapped.
lad in our class who he
Yeah,
was saying they tried to take him.
yeah, I remember that, and I remember the teacher asked
Won't
us about
name him,
that.
but like I
Sure,
remember, and I remember we saw a van actually drive past the school, and I
yeah,
was like, "Hey, man, is that the van?" And he ran to the teacher, and he was like, I saw the van."
Jesus,
But yeah, no, Jesus. But
the
sometimes it can be just easier to simplify things like that,
yeah,
especially to kids, because there's no point in telling a kid that that person is probably doing bad things because bad things was done to them as a kid or whatever. But
mm,
it doesn't matter, and that's the
yeah,
sense in that act. That act is evil in that sense.
yeah,
So like you wouldn't like we're watching a documentary that was just released about Arthur Allen, a man who was the Zodiac,
yeah, yep,
and it's really disturbing on so many levels.
mm,
Well, it's like, I wouldn't tell a kid to go say hi to him, you know?
sure, yeah. Maybe all he needs is a hug.
Yeah, exactly, you know?
Well, I do some, yeah, I think I think there's a lot of fascination now about like true crime and murders and what was that guy called? Jeffrey Dahmer and things like that
Mm.
and a lot of interest in that now and I think yeah, I don't know, we're trying to get into the kind of What annoys me, man, I don't want to go too much of a tangent about this, unless you want to, I don't mind. But I think there's like a lot of mythologizing about serial killers, but it's
There
done
is.
in a way, not necessarily serial killers, but just people who have done awful things,
Yeah.
and but it's done in a very sensationalist hype way,
It's
where
kind
it's
of
like,
romanticized.
yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
it's even more. It's kind of commercialized too, where it's like we're going to talk about like something evil that was done to a person, but first a word from our sponsor. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like I
But
don't
it's kind
know,
of like, here's our top 10 serial killers, you know?
because I'm more interested in the victims, and I'm kind of like, well, if I
Yeah.
was that person, or if I was a family member of that person, I wouldn't want fucking an ad for Squarespace after
Mm. And
after
that, but
like
that
hearing,
always like it absolutely amazes me and horrifies me that it's like someone's life is literally taken, like
yeah,
just because some crazy person gets off on it and their
yeah,
life is gone, like you
yeah,
know, and
I know,
that
and
to me that is so scary, and every decision that they've made in their life has led to this point for
yeah,
both of them
because
is to come across this person.
the one thing about me, man, and it's something I torture myself with. I'm very afraid of death, and but I kind of think like there's no satisfying ending for me because if there is nothing, and we just die, and then we're just like underground or we're ashes for eternity while life goes on, that
Mm,
doesn't satisfy me. But at the same time, something like heaven doesn't satisfy me because I don't want to live forever, and then
yeah.
reincarnation doesn't satisfy me because I don't want to keep reliving life. So it's like for me, I just feel there's no good outcome.
But that, that's the thing. But if one of those is true, you won't care. So
Yeah.
at least you'll have that. But
That's the only thing I think about. It's like, well, at least I won't be alive.
you won't care.
That's the
And
thing.
does it?
I think
I
asleep. You know what I mean? Like, well, it's just like
it's kind
perpetual
yeah. I
sleep, I
think
guess.
sleep is kind of dreams are kind of like a little hint into what
Yeah.
it could be like. But what there was one person I heard before describe it, and it was one of my favorite descriptions of the whole experience. So he had a death experience basically,
Hmm.
and he was brought back, and he was being asked about it, like, and basically he was like, well, the when people tell you that there's this light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, that an angel's coming to me, he's like, oh, that wasn't what it was. And he's like, I don't know if people see that, maybe their brain makes them see it because they believe it, but what he said, the one thing that he did have, and people do say, is he had his whole life flash before his
Flash
eyes,
before your eyes now.
and time did not exist. So
Mm.
his whole life is like being played to him on a like on a reel, you know what I mean? And all the good, all the bad, everything that his life was about, and he was watching it and felt this peace,
Yeah.
and then it was over, and all he could feel was peace. And it's not a peace you could feel in life. It's a different kind of peace, he described it as. He says this was like a real peace he felt, and there was no concern for anything really. And then nothing, and then he woke up, was brought back, and he was saying that he had a lot of trouble coping with this, coming back to life, basically coming back to the world that we live in because it's crazy, you know, and a lot of it makes no sense. These rules and laws and governments,
Yeah.
he said, it was very hard to go back to work and be okay with things. But he says the one thing that made him kind of go get better was that reel at the end. And he says, basically, I want to add to that reel at the end and make sure I have something good to look at.
Yeah. No, I also it's interesting. There's a documentary that came. It was quite a controversial documentary. Came out, I think, in around 2007. I want to say. It was called The Bridge, and it was a documentary on the Golden Gate Bridge where a lot of people attempt suicide. And they talk with some survivors and they're like they kind of describe it. They're like, yeah, when you're free falling, and you kind of realize like, oh, I regret, like all of them regret it, and they're like, you kind of come to this realization like everything that we worry about, that we stress about, our mortgage, our job, or whatever, like it's so trivial and inconsequential, really. Like, it's just
Yeah.
this weird way I think humans have of building society where we stress ourselves out to the max. And obviously, I mean, there's some great things that have been done in medicine, for example,
Yeah, yeah.
things like that, and all these like great things that have been done, but just the way humans, I think, kind of through our limited understanding, try and arrange these things can give a lot of unwarranted stress and uncertainty to people that probably isn't deserved, you know?
But that, it makes it is kind of like a crazy life we've kind of kind of have given ourselves and been given, because it's kind of like, who's to blame now? Is it too late to change? Because a lot of this life is very materialistic, uh, very based on entertainment. But when you really think about the truth, and people will call, I remember having arguments with my dad when I was a kid, and he'd be like, "Oh, what's the other option? Anarchy?" That kind
Yeah.
of, you get out and get a job, and it's
It mightn't
just
be
like,
perfect, but it's all we know, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's kind of, sometimes I wonder why some people have kids, because it's like, you're really unhappy. You want me to go through this as well,
I
you
think
know?
about that too, yeah.
Yeah,
But then
and
I also think like are we kind of, I don't know, it's a weird thing too, because then there's also the pressure of extending your lineage and all this stuff, you know?
yeah, it's really messed up. It's like, because in truth, in not the human reality, but in real reality, everything is free. You just have to like get it. Like, you just, like,
Mhm.
the fox or doesn't go, "Oh, I'm out of money. My pockets are empty. I better not eat those chickens." You
Yeah.
know, why is it we're the only living thing that has to pay to
Stress
live?
about these things. Yeah. No, it's a very fascinating thing. And then, but the counter argument, I guess, would be, well, if we didn't have these things, we wouldn't have like shops where we have all where we can get bread and water and whatever. So it's like, I don't
Hmm.
know. It's a complicated thing, and I don't have the answers to, but I'm suffering like everyone else.
And but that's the thing. I think we're very generational. We have a generational brainwashing going on, because we're taught to believe that we would humanity would fall to pieces if we didn't have this capitalist world and way of living. Uh, and I actually remember a story about some scientist who tried to prove that humans would, turn to animals and kill each other, and he got these group of people on a boat and sailed across in the oceans, and what actually happened was the people came together
Yeah.
and became the best friends, and they were all, obviously none of them were like sick. So these are all average people,
Mm.
uh, and the scientist was getting annoyed that his experiment wasn't working the way he said it would work. It so what he did was he tried to turn them all
Yeah.
against each other. I don't know if you ever heard of this,
No, I haven't.
but he tried to turn them all against each other, and uh, it didn't work. They ended up turning against him. Like, they didn't kill him or anything like that, but he ended up alienated, and he was so desperate that he was really trying to get them to, like, kill each other.
Lord of the Flies, yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And in when humans are actually in that real situation, there's like an understanding. But with the capitalist mind, they're always going to tell us, no, 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 it won't work. It won't work because,
It's human nature, they
y-
say.
yeah, yeah, it's human
There's a
nature,
great.
and we need these shops. What will you do for work? How will you get this? How do you, will we barter? You know,
Mm,
But it's kind of like, why do we have to barter? Why can't we just help each other?
yeah.
And that's
But
like, yeah, it's probably like a utopian dream or whatever. But
well,
if,
you need utopians, I think, for society to work.
yeah,
That's my opinion. I really
yeah,
do. And I enjoy an anti-capitalist creed myself, so I'll try not to go on too much of a diversion, but like, I do think like the kind of system we work in just can't, you look at it can't work without people suffering, and
Exactly.
something like homeless people, which I think is like a huge disgrace that not everyone can be homed, when we totally could afford it. I think like one of the sad things about that is that like people actually benefit from people being homeless because you can use that as an example and you go, well, if you don't pay your mortgage or you don't pay your rent or you don't go to work and you don't do this, that's you. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah,
just I think it's such a sad existence. I once gave a homeless person a cigarette and it's just like, you see them shake and and you're like, oh my God, like what are we doing? You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. That's it. And you know, a lot of these issues stem from this capitalist society. Like, why does this person like have these mental issues? Or
Yeah,
why are
that's
they
the other thing
addicted?
because
Why are
it
they
creates
addicted?
that.
You
Like
know,
something like theft, for example, is I think a lot of the times it's born out of people not having enough, you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
obviously there are going to be people who, you can point to examples, well, people robbing this or robbing that just to have wealth. It's like, well, no, it's like sometimes it's like just me basic existence or basic survival. And of course, like
Mm.
if you put someone in the situation where they're on the streets in the cold and they don't have anything, of course survival instinct's going to kick in, and it's also going to, as you mentioned, create mental health problems where a lot of these issues probably wouldn't have existed without the kind of current economic system too. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it makes us lose our compassion and our humanity a lot of the times, just
It kind of
to
makes
make
it.
numbers go up.
Yeah, it makes it kind of like a one for all like kind of thing. Everyone's kind of like you kind of end up having to look out for yourself, uh, because that's what society kind of push is built on. You
Yeah,
know.
and also it's like if you're in a business, for example, like you don't want to step out of line because again they make examples of people like that, and they go, oh well, that
Mm.
guy's losing his job, and then others kind of have to turn their face because they're like, I don't want to be that guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I just think it's really anti-human. I think in a lot of
yeah.
ways. That's my opinion.
Funny, it's funny, isn't it? It's when you say it like that. It's anti-human, and it was created by humans.
Yeah. But then again, I mean, well, it's not the only economic system we had, like feudalism, and we all kind of agree that that's a bad thing now.
Mm.
Obviously, slavery, I don't think anyone's in favor of, but it's like
No.
there were other things, and at the time they were seen as the only way. So why is this way like foolproof? And I think even the biggest advocates of capitalism go, well, it's not perfect, but it's the best system or whatever. You go, well, I don't know. I think they just kind of lack imagination.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the thing.
But
It's
I understand that too.
selfishness makes everybody settle for it.
Yeah, but I understand people's fear because they go, well, we
Yeah,
try, say, for example, socialism. Well, then we get the USSR, we get, this place or
yeah,
whatever. And I go, well, first of all, like the USSR obviously wasn't real socialism. We know that, like, realistically, but it's just kind of like, I think people do get afraid. They're like, well, I hate the system, but I have the shots with all the stuff I
yeah,
need and there's a reliability to it. So I think the kind of mixed economy we do have now where it's like, well, if you're really struggling, the state will give you some pickings.
yeah.
That's kind of what we're in now, but it's just horrible. And I actually think it's bad for your mental health because we were talking about like rejection earlier, and it's one thing to get rejected from, say, for example, like I don't know, I'm submitting a short story here and there, whatever, it doesn't get picked. That's not going to change my
Or
life really in a dramatic sense, but if you're someone who's looking for a job and you're just getting rejection after
or
rejection, it's gonna drive you. It's gonna affect your character, I think, at some point.
or even speaking of rejections or types of rejections, have you heard of the Paralympian in Canada
No.
who asked for a lift to be put on her stairs?
Hmm.
Uh,
I haven't heard this song.
no, so she asked for the lift to be put on her stairs, and then she got told to basically, as an option, you could kill yourself.
Oh, is that the euthanasia
The
thing? Yeah, I did hear
assisted
about
you,
this. Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
called MAID, but
Yeah,
it's apparently being investigated now. It's like, why?
that's horrible. Yeah,
Imagine,
because
like,
to be clear, I actually do kind of agree with euthanasia to some degree,
oh
but
yeah, no,
not in that
so
sense. Not in
not in
that
that
sense.
sense,
Like, yeah,
because they're just disabled.
yeah. No,
It's
and
not.
especially if there's people like I think it should be like a last resort sort of thing where it's like,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
this
no, I
person is here,
completely.
we need to
I
make
think
it.
we're definitely thinking the same way because like.
Here's my theory, right? So in I think it was in Canada they have obviously they have euthanasia, but
Mm,
I think the administration is with a chocolate. I think there was some kind of like chocolate thing they eat and it slowly makes you go to sleep and your heart stops and things like that. I
huh,
say if we introduce euthanasia over here, my provision would be okay, but you have to give them a placebo first because some people do. Honestly, man, it's like what I was saying with the bridge. Some people like when they're like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" So I think
yeah,
you should
yeah,
give them the placebo first and then go, "Ah, that was just a Cadbury."
yeah.
That was just a chocolate button. Now, do you really want the thing? Like, I honestly think a placebo measure first should go into effect, but you
Yeah,
can't tell people that because then
yeah,
they'll know.
yeah. No,
They're like, all
yeah,
right, give me
no,
the.
I completely agree because it's kind of like a no. You're sure? Okay,
Yeah,
okay, you're
are you
sure.
sure?
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay. You really want
It's a
it?
difficult thing, and I understand people's aversion to euthanasia because it can get abused, like in that case.
Yeah,
So I'm sympathetic to people who are like, I don't want that in this country. I get it too, but at the same
yeah,
time, also like, well. It's a very complicated thing, but I know I agree with it to some degree. If it's administered properly,
exactly. Yeah.
I just don't trust the current government, let's say, to do it
No, yeah.
sympathetically and
I don't even
efficiently.
trust the government to do it. I think it should be solely doctors, you know.
Yeah. Well, it would have to be through legislation. That's
Oh,
the
it's
issue too.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
I don't trust the lawmakers necessarily
Yeah, 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 exactly,
to
yeah.
do it efficiently and foolproof. Just before we go, Ryan, the album you want to plug, if you just want to talk about the album, where people can get it and things like that. So, to be clear, Rain is the record you're plugging, yeah?
Yeah, I was like, even both of them, Solas Fair and Rain was the both of the albums I was really kind of looking out there because their most recent ones, Solas Fair was October, and Rain was literally just this month. Uh, and they were part of the whole project of the home recordings, releasing one album each year, and you can listen to them on Bandcamp or even on pretty much anywhere because we use DistroKid, so it's released on Spotify, it's released on iTunes
YouTube
and
and all that, yeah.
Amazon, YouTube, uh, Solas Fair, and Rain, and that's under Two for Joy.
Yeah. And then Home is coming out in January, as you mentioned. I don't know if there's
Oh
more
yeah.
specific date or
Yeah, no date
just
yet, but I
January.
just didn't want to release another one for this year
Hmm.
because that would probably be too much. So I would just release it then for probably January, and I'd probably start working on a next project, and then
Jesus Christ. Take a break, man.
no, I won't release as much now. I definitely won't release as much, but
No, no,
there's
not
definitely
for our sake, for your sake, I mean.
there's definitely something I want to do with other musicians. I would love to get back with Lee back in Minute because he did a lot of drumming for he was actually on the January album. He was on One for Sorrow. He drums and he sings in that one as well. He sings one of the songs. But I'd love to get back with him and get making more stuff.
And any live shows or anything people can see it?
I've no live shows now at the minute because especially with the old painting,
Fair enough.
getting some Christmas orders in, so painting people's pets. So if
Oh,
anybody's
fair.
looking for a pet portrait, check out Paint and Paws Ireland.
Paint and Pause Ireland. I will put that link in too. Yeah, and would you like to perform live more? Would you like to see the country do like a little tour? Because there's open mic nights or anything. This one thing
Hmm.
I really like is actually I think in recent years, Ireland has really become like every pocket of Ireland has like some kind of like local music scene, which I think is
Yeah,
great. Would you be interested in? I could even help you if you want. Looking at places you could drive to and get back that night, so you don't have to pay for accommodation. Just somewhere to
yeah.
kind of, I guess, like spread the word a little bit of what you're doing.
I'd say yeah. I do love going to like open mics every now and then, especially because of usually open mics have their gear there, so I can just basically just bring my guitar and harmonica and just play away. I used to do a
You
lot
know,
of
you
it,
need business cards so you can pass them around. And then you
basically.
go,
Yeah,
I do painting, I do writing, I do everything. I do production. You really are a savant.
I haven't actually done an open mic in a long time now, but as usually I'm happy just recording and stuff like that. But I would like to get out someday soon, and especially because I was trying to get into British song, but maybe I'm trying to jump into the deep end there. So there's a few others in even Westport that I'd love to get down to and just play a few tunes. That I used to do it all the time.
Well, thanks very much. Check it out.
Yeah.
Two for Joy, Ryan Ennis, everywhere. Painter, producer, extraordinaire, musician. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Chat to you again.
And I'll see you probably in 6 months.
Yeah. Next album. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Where am I?
Where are we now? How do
Jesus.
you hang up?
Uh, Jesus.
Leave. Oh, there's the little leave. There's a little
No,
man
no,
at the
here
door
it's my
there,
end.
right?
See you.
So
Bye.
long.
Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.